media capital of the world.
During the current state of emergency due to COVID-19, council members will be participating online, and the public will not be able to physically attend today's meeting. To participate in the general public comment period, please call now at 818-238-3335. Members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes dependent upon the number of speakers.
As you can see, I'm still in the learning mode. Take 3. Good evening and welcome to the Burbank City Council joint meeting with Successor Agency, Housing Authority, Parking Authority, Public Financing Authority, and the Youth Endowment Services Fund Board on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, could you please conduct the roll call? And nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. And this is going to be the rotation you call for me now. So we'll see if we can get it right here. Councilmember Frutos.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz.
Present.
Councilmember Springer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Anthony.
Present.
And Mayor Talamantes.
Yes, present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There will be 2 periods of public comment tonight. The first period is for general public comment on any matter concerning city business and or any agenda items except the public hearing. The second period is for public comment on the public hearing. If you would like to participate in general public comment, please call now at 818-238-3335. That's once again general public comment, 818-238-3335. Callers will be placed in a queue until we begin public comment. For public comment on the public hearing, we kindly ask you to call 818-238-3335 after the general public comment is closed. So before we continue the meeting, I would like to have a moment of silence for the victims of the tornado in Kentucky. The state of Kentucky is in our thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. Thank you. We do not have any announcements this evening, so we'll move on to council presentations. We have one presentation on the agenda this evening. Today we recognize 9 Burbank Water and Power employees for their contributions to the September 2021 Imperial Irrigation District Mutual Assistance efforts. Let's watch a video to help us understand the hard work of this crew in September.
Burbank Water and Power is part of a group of community-owned utilities in Southern California that help one another during emergency situations. Recently, high winds and flash flooding struck during a powerful surprise storm in the Calipatria, California area. The Imperial Irrigation District, or IID, tallied over 100 broken utility poles and downed wire across 3 key transmission lines. The BWP line mechanics were quickly dispatched on the 200-mile journey to assist the IID. BWP, IID, and several other utilities worked together to restore power as soon as possible and get affected geothermal power plants back online. Facing 110-degree weather, BWP cleared over a mile of road, set 17 new electrical poles, and pulled in over 1.5 miles of wire in under a week. As a community-owned utility, BWP is proud to provide support to other utilities when in need. We are extremely proud of our crews for their commitment, craftsmanship, and skill. For more information on BWP, visit burbankwaterandpower.com.
I would like to welcome Riyad Slayman, Assistant General Manager of the Electric Services, to say a few words. Mr. Slayman.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I'm really happy that we're able to recognize and show appreciation to our line crew and their work in the harshest condition to help bring back power to not only Burbank residents, but other cities in need. The IID staff was very appreciative of our help, and they complimented BWP crews, especially highlighting their professionalism, efficiency, and consistency in all that heat all week long. So also recently our crew stepped away from the Thanksgiving table with their families to come out and restore power to Burbank residents affected by the mild windstorms that we had, so they could continue enjoying their Thanksgiving. That's the kind of dedication our crews have for the city, and I'm very proud of them and appreciate the energy they bring in and day out. With that, I'd like to introduce Tom Wilke, the Manager of Electrical Distribution, who managed the rollout of the IID support for introduction of his staff that led the effort.
Good evening, Mayor Telemontes, Vice Mayor Anthony, and council members. I'm Tom Wilke, Electrical Distribution Manager here at BWP. As you saw in the video, BWP has alliances with other utilities that can ask each other for help when needed. I'm here to introduce our team that volunteered to go above and beyond to help out the Western Power Grid and repair a terrible disaster in the Coachella Valley. All of our power linemen here at BWP have a great sense of pride in their work, especially in helping folks get their lights back on. So I'm proud to introduce to you Edison Rosas, Jason Edwards, Christoph Cardos, Will Ludwig, Chad Nichols, Andreas Gonzalez, Ryan Holcomb, Andrew Gomez, and Charlie Lorenz. I believe Jason Edwards, one of the leaders of the crew, would like to say a few words.
How's everybody doing tonight? Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to my BWP family, Riyad, Tom, everybody who made this possible for us. Here at BWP, like Tom said, we take a lot of pride in our work, you know, and it's just awesome that we get the opportunity to, you know, to help others and to show what we can do and also work side by side with, you know, other utilities. You know, it's not every day, you know, that people get to do the work that we do, and it's just awesome, you know. And so like I said, you know, thank you to BWP and, you know, the crew members and all of IID.
All right. Thank you, Jason. And with that, back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason, for those heartfelt words. I want to thank the crew, Mr. Wilke and Mr. Slayman, for your essential service. We appreciate all you do for Burbank. I have a certificate of recognition for your dedication to Burbank and the assistance you provided to the Imperial Irrigation District. Let me read it here. And this one happens to be on top, and certificate of recognition, City of Burbank, is presented to Jason Edwards and the entire crew as well. You're going to get one each. Your contribution to the September 2021 Imperial Irrigation District Mutual Assistance efforts. Great work. Our Burbank Water and Power Electrical Distribution crew is truly a top-notch team. You not only faithfully take care of our residents and businesses, but contribute your skills and attention to important outside agencies when needed, ensuring critical services never stop. On behalf of the Burbank City Council, I honor your work and appreciate all you do, and I wish you continued success. Signed this day, Jesse Talamantes, December 14, 2021. So that goes to all members of the crew, and congratulations.
Thank you.
As a reminder, you would like to participate in general public comment, please call now at 818-238-3335. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one item. I'd like to call up our Chief of Police, Mike Albanese, to provide an update on Friday night's fatal accident that occurred and provide the latest status report.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Mayor Talamantes, Vice Mayor Anthony, Councilmember Frutos, Councilmember Springer, and Councilmember Schultz. Good evening. Sadly, I'm going to discuss an occurrence that occurred on December 10th at about 9:25 p.m. There was a multiple vehicle traffic accident on the northbound 5 just south of Burbank. There was a black Lexus that was involved, the primary vehicle that was involved. That vehicle then got off the freeway at Empire, essentially fled the scene, continued southbound on San Fernando Road, struck the center median, San Fernando and east, continued driving, swerving across traffic lanes, and as the driver approached Delaware, there was a red light. There was a young woman that was crossing the street, legally crossing the street. The black sedan Lexus ultimately struck the victim, pedestrian. The driver continued driving, collided with the curb in front of Macy's at Cypress. The driver exited the vehicle in an effort to flee. Our officers were in the area and were able to detain him. There was a lot of physical evidence, digital evidence. The suspect appeared to be under the influence. Ultimately, we had to secure a search warrant to get a blood sample from the suspect. Today, 1 count of gross vehicle manslaughter while intoxicated, 1 count of felony driving under the influence, 1 count of felony hit and run was filed by the district attorney's office. Sadly, the female pedestrian was pronounced dead at the scene. And there's another investigation concurrent with our investigation, and that's with the California Highway Patrol that is doing a separate investigation as far as the occurrence that occurred on the northbound 5 just south of Burbank.
Thank you, Chief. It was sad. Obviously, the whole situation was extremely difficult to comprehend. And a 23-year-old female
Correct.
Lost her life.
Right.
But
Unsettling is an understatement, and our hearts and prayers go to the family and to her soul. But please understand that it was driving under the influence that was the primary cause, not necessarily speeding.
Right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Hess, anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask the chief just a quick question? Thank you,
Yes,
Chief.
Mr. Vice Mayor. Go ahead.
You said it was involved, this car was the primary cause of the accident on the freeway first. They were the instigator of that pileup,
Correct.
and then they fled onto our streets to escape whatever.
Right, so the driver of that vehicle left the scene of that accident, so that's the hit and run on the freeway, jumped off at Empire, and that's when he was on Burbank surface streets.
Okay. And I hear we're having trouble contacting the next of kin for the woman.
I can't report out on that, so I don't have the specific details.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I appreciate you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Springer.
Yes, how many cars were involved on the North 5 incident, and were there injuries there?
We're waiting on that CHP investigation, so understand that that's a separate investigation. They're looking at their physical evidence, but it was multiple cars, and I can't tell you with certainty if there were reportable injuries. I don't believe anybody was hospitalized.
Now, Chief, you mentioned that the car exited at Empire?
Yes.
Okay, and then came back towards, back
Yes.
around towards Burbank Boulevard?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank
night,
you, sir. Mr. McDougall, will you please report on closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. For the public, the City Council met in closed session this evening on 4 items. The first item, wrongful termination case with Nick Nichols versus the City of Burbank. Case EC 064617. Council took unanimous action to authorize the City Attorney's Office to file an appeal of adverse portions of trial court ruling. The second item of anticipated litigation with one potential defendant under Government Code Section 54956.9. Third item was conference with labor negotiator Ms. Betsy McClinton under 54957.6 concerning Burbank City Employees Association, Burbank Management Association, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Burbank Firefighters, International Association of Firefighters Local 778, Burbank Firefighters Chiefs Officers Unit, Burbank Police Officers Association, Unrepresented Managers Z Group, Executives, City Attorney, and City Manager. And finally, City Council met to discuss the performance evaluation of the City Manager pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and took no reportable action on all but the first item as announced.
Thank you, sir. Now is the time for joint public comment. Members of the public may address the council for up to 3 minutes on any matter concerning city business and/or any agenda items except the public hearing. Remember to lower the volume on your TV or computer and take your phone off speaker when you deliver public comment. To participate, please call 818-238-3335. Once again, it's 238-3335. Ms. Mullins, do we have any callers at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're ready to go.
Our first caller is Assembly Member Laura Friedman.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to call in tonight to send a very hearty congratulations to Mayor Talamantes for his election or his appointment, and also to Vice Mayor Anthony for his appointment. Mayor Talamantes, I have certainly worked with you many times over the years, for many, many years, both when I was a council member and also now in the Assembly. And I am really looking forward to the year that's coming. You are a true collaborator, a true partner, and someone who absolutely governs with his heart and his head, and always with the best interest of his community, very much in the forefront of every decision that you make. You are a pleasure to work with, whether we agree or disagree on things. I know that we can always talk. We always see eye to eye. We come to understand each other. And you are somebody who builds consensus. And I very much appreciate that and look forward to the year ahead. So congratulations. And Vice Mayor Anthony, it's been such a pleasure to watch you grow into your new role over the last year. You are a wonderful commissioner, and you are a wonderful leader, and you bring fresh new ideas to the council, and I also look forward to working with you and the rest of the council. And I truly can't wait to see what you and your council are going to accomplish in the next year, as hopefully we move towards a recovery and a healing time for everybody, and a time of transition to better things ahead. So just wanted to send my congratulations to you and to wish you and the whole community a very happy and safe holiday.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear from you, and thank you for those kind words.
Thank you all.
Happy
Good night.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Next caller.
Our next caller is Linda Wamsley.
Good evening. My name is Linda Wamsley. I am speaking this evening on regarding Metro's NoHo to Pasadena BRT proposal. I want to thank you, the City Council, and the Planning and Transportation staff for their steadfast opposition to dedicated bus lanes on Olive between Buena Vista and Glen Oaks. I wanted to make a quick observation that we have a recent shift in Metro's messaging about how they intend to implement BRT in Burbank. It has been all about curb running, which required parking removal. However, over the last few months, I've noticed their messaging now focuses more on side running, which would require the removal of travel lanes instead. Side running would turn Olive Avenue into a narrow corridor with only one travel lane in each direction. It would squeeze about 2,000 cars per hour from 2 lanes down to 1 in order to allow for a dedicated bus lane that services only 6 buses per hour. What's going to happen on a weekday lunch hour when McDonald's drive-thru has 8 cars backed up on Olive and we have only 1 travel lane? How will this impact St. Finbar School's daily parent pickup and drop-off? And consider an ambulance making its way down Olive with a Burbank resident needing immediate and medical attention at St. Joe's. Yikes. How do dedicated bus lanes on Olive actually benefit Burbank? In my opinion, the answer is clear. They don't. The staff has stated over and over again that the NoHo to Pasadena can be a successful BRT and still have mixed flow through Burbank. So why is there still a debate here? All 5 of you are on record stating this is not a good plan for our city. As my representatives, please remain steadfast in your opposition and protect Burbank against the heavy hand of Metro. On Olive, 1 lane would be insane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the call.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to say I don't have any more callers for
No
you.
more callers. Okay, I
Thank
expected
you.
dozens.
That's in honor of your first
Well,
night.
thank you. There being no further public comment, I now declare the public comment period closed. Now is the time for a brief response from City Council, the City Manager, and or the City Attorney. Colleagues, Councilmember Frutos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first want to thank our Assembly Member Laura Friedman for her kind words to our new mayor and our new vice mayor. And I also want to thank Linda Wamsley for her input on the Burbank BRT, and I am definitely not supportive of it. It should be mixed flow, but it's not on the agenda. I won't discuss it, but I just want to say thank you for taking the time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Frutos. Councilmember Springer.
Yes, thank you to Assembly Member Friedman and also to Ms. Walmsley. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Vice Mayor Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Laura Friedman for calling in. I appreciate those kind words. And to Linda, there is so much of this discussion happening right now. For those of you at home who want to get involved in that talk, there is an email directly to Metro, NoHo Pass BRT at metro.net. That's NoHo PAS BRT at metro.net. And you can tell them directly how you feel.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I too would like to thank our Assembly Member Friedman for calling in and saying those kind words in regards to the new mayor and the vice mayor. We have worked for a long time. We worked together when you were on the Glendale City Council, and we've been moving forward when you moved up to Sacramento and still keeping in contact. And like you mentioned, we don't agree all the time, but I think we disagree. We agree to disagree and move forward. So thank you very much for all your help. Mr. City Manager, any response? Mr. City Attorney? No? Okay. Let's see, so we'll move on to the consent calendar may be enacted in one motion. Madam City Clerk, please read the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 1, consideration and adoption of an uncodified urgency ordinance temporary allowing restaurants to continue use of their private parking lots for outdoor dining. Item number 2, successor agency minutes and approval of minutes of May 25th, 2021. Item number 3, approval of Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Burbank and the Burbank Police Officers Association from December 14, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. Item number 4, adoption of a resolution approving the establishment of the salary for the classification of workers' compensation and risk management representative 1 and adoption of a resolution approving the citywide salary schedule. Item number 5, adoption of finding to continue virtual meetings for the City Council and all other city boards, commissions, and committees. Item number 6, approval of the formation of 2022 Charter Review Committee and requests for applications to the 2022 Charter Review Committee with council members' approval, council members' individual appointments at future council meetings. Item number 7, adoption of a resolution to undertake short-term sales and purchases of up to 5 years in duration for products and services necessary for operation of the city's electric utility, Burbank Water and Power. And item number 8 is adoption of resolution amending Resolution 2019-161, authorizing the extension of outdoor dining program, including continued use of street parking for dining and permits in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Item number 9, annual review of plan development and development agreements. Item number 10, review of development impact fee funds as of June 30th, 2021. And that concludes the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Councilmember Frutos?
Yes, motion to move consent calendar forward, sir.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Springer?
Yeah, I'll second it, but I just have a question about L1. It's just a simple question. Are we working with, we had some complaints about people who live adjacent to the parking lots, and are we working with those residents as we move forward?
Mr. City Manager?
Councilmember Springer, yes, we are. I know our economic development team, Public Works, as well as others from community development. If there's any issue, we try to make sure we resolve it. We worked with the owner of the business. I'll follow up, I think, on the one that I think you're talking about, and make sure I have not received a complaint or any issues with that. So I'm hoping it's resolved, but we'll certainly follow up.
Thank you. So I second.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to pull it, but for number 10, Mr. City Manager, could you just give a quick, brief synopsis of what that is to the public and if there were any changes, significant changes from last year?
Sure. I'm going to actually defer to our David Kriske, our Assistant Community Development Department Director, and I'm desperately looking for him on the screen.
I see his name.
There you go. Okay. Save me, David. Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Anthony, members of the City Council, David Kriske with the Community Development Department. In answer to your question, Mr. Vice Mayor, no, there's not a substantial change or difference to this report from the one for last year, which actually you only approved a few months ago. We were a little behind in last year's report. This annual report is required by the Development Impact Fee Law to just show an accounting of how we're spending our money. on the projects that the impact fees fund. And more detailed information is actually in the CIP that you adopt every year. This is just an accounting at the end of the year showing what the cash balances are on the projects, what we spent the money on, which projects we've been pursuing for the year, and what we're doing going forward. So this is a more of a kind of a financial cleanup item that's required. The real issues that we'll want to discuss, obviously, is later in the agenda.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So there's a motion and a second. Madam City Clerk?
Thank you. Councilmember Frutos?
Yes.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Anthony?
Yes.
And Mayor Talamantes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. This is a time and place for the hearing for project number 21-5452 concerning introduction of an ordinance amending zoning for the property located at 228 South Naomi Street from Media District High Density Residential, MDR4, to Media District General Business, MDC3. Before we begin, are there any disclosures related to this hearing by my colleagues? Okay, seeing none. Do we have the complete file of exhibits, correspondence, emails, and other documents?
Yes, you do.
Great, thank you. Has the city received any written communications on this matter, and have they been provided to all city council members?
I actually don't have any communications at all, so I don't believe council received anything that I didn't receive.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Will the representative of the Community Development Department please introduce yourself and summarize the matter for us?
Thank you, Mayor Talamantes. I'm going to share my screen now. Good evening, Mayor Talamantes and members of the council. My name is Shipra Rajesh, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. Tonight, you are being requested to consider a zone map amendment to change the zoning of the property located at 228 South Naomi Street from Media District High Density Residential to Media District General Business Zone. The project site, located at 228 South Naomi Street, is owned by Burbank Water and Power Department. The project site is currently zoned Media District High Density Residential and is developed as Burbank Water and Power's Naomi Substation, which is an electrical distribution facility. BWP's electrical distribution facility was previously approved to operate at the site under a conditional use permit issued on March 23, 1970. BWP is requesting a zone map amendment to change the zoning of the project site from its current zoning, which is Media District High Density Residential, to Media District General Business Zone. The underlying general plan land use designation for the project site is Media District Commercial. Additionally, the project site is located within the Media District specific plan. The proposed zone map amendment would align the zoning of the project site with the underlying general plan land use designation and with the objectives and vision of the Media District specific plan that seeks to facilitate commercial, medical, and media businesses in a manner that is compatible with the nearby residences. Please note that the project does not include any construction. This slide shows the project site's current MDR4 zoning for multifamily residential use. The site is surrounded by lots that are zoned for commercial uses, including media-related and medical office use. The project site is the only lot in the immediate area that is zoned for residential use. This slide notes the project site's General Plan Media District Commercial Land Use Designation. The Media District Commercial Area is envisioned as a regional employment center that includes a variety of medical, media-oriented uses and other commercial uses. The project site's existing MDR4 zoning is meant for high-density residential use, which was consistent with the pattern of zoning in the past. However, due to the ongoing use of the site as a BWP electrical distribution facility and the development of commercial and professional office uses in the surrounding area, the site's current residential zoning is no longer the most appropriate zoning designation to ensure consistency with the underlying media district commercial general plan land use designation. As noted in the slide, the project site is located within media district specific plan area. The goals of the specific plan are to allow sufficient and reasonable development opportunities for media and medical establishments, ensure provision of infrastructure and public service improvements to accommodate the needs of all existing and future developments in the media district, and protect and preserve the quality of life of existing residential neighborhoods within the planning area. The proposed rezoning of the project site will ensure that these specific plan goals are met. The new zoning will allow the continued operation of the Naomi substation, which is a public utility facility. This facility is required to ensure availability of sufficient electrical capacity for the existing and future development needs within the specific plan area. This slide provides an aerial view of the project site. The project site is developed as an unmanned electrical distribution facility, which includes an electrical control building and pad-mounted electrical equipment. As previously noted, this public utility facility was permitted at this project site located in the MDR4 zone through city approval of a conditional use permit in 1970. In the current MDR4 residential zone, public utility facilities are permitted subject to a CUP in order to limit visual and other noise-related nuisances that could negatively impact the surrounding residential uses. As previously mentioned, the project site is the only residentially zoned lot in this area. The surrounding land uses are predominantly commercially zoned lots containing media-related commercial uses and other professional office uses. A public utility facility of this type would be a by right use within a majority of surrounding commercial zoning districts, including the MDC3 zone. The proposed project will rezone the existing MDR4 zone to MDC3 zone that will allow by right approval of a public utility facility, including the existing electrical distribution facility. This slide on your screen shows the proposed zoning of the project site, which, as I mentioned, is Media District Commercial General Business Zone, which allows a public utility facility like the Naomi substation as a permitted by right use. If the proposed rezoning of the site is approved, then it will facilitate any future modification and upgrade of the existing substation and ensure that the zoning of the lot is consistent with that of the surrounding parcels on the same block. The proposed zone map amendment would align the project site's zoning with the underlying general plan land use designation and ensure consistency with the goals and vision of the media district specific plan. The proposed zone map amendment will allow commercial land use on the project site consistent with the adjacent media-related commercial and office uses and medical office uses in the neighborhood. The proposed rezoning will facilitate better transition between commercial and industrial land uses located towards the center of media district specific plan and multifamily residential uses that are located along the periphery of the specific plan. Finally, the requested zone map amendment will allow a public utility facility as a permitted use at the project site, which will enable any future substation modifications and upgrades to accommodate the needs of existing and future development. Public outreach for the public hearing on the zone map amendment was done in accordance with Burbank Municipal Code, Section 10-1-1964, which included notice in the newspaper 10 days prior to the hearing, and the mailing of public hearing notices to residents and property owners within 1,000 feet radius of the project site. On November 8, 2021, the Planning Board held a public hearing to consider the zone map amendment to change the project site zoning from MDR4 to MDC3 zone. At the public hearing, the Planning Board considered staff's recommendation. After deliberation on the project, the board voted to recommend approval of the zone map amendment to the City Council. Based on the staff report, board resolution, and the findings associated with the proposed zone map amendment, staff recommends that the council adopt the following ordinance. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Burbank amending the zoning for the property located at 228 South Naomi Street from Media District High Density Residential MDR4 to Media District General Business MDC3. This concludes my presentation, and staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing to hear from any persons who wish to speak on this matter. Each person may address the council for up to 3 minutes. Please call 818-238-3335. The phone lines are now open.
Mr. Mayor, the lines have been open as soon as we finish the consent calendar, so it's safe. There's nobody on the line right now. So you can move forward and close this.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. There being no further public comment, I now declare the public comment period closed. Would the representative of the Community Development Department like to make any further comments?
No comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Does the council have any questions of staff? Colleagues, any questions? Councilmember Schultz and then Councilmember Springer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, staff, for a thorough presentation. Just one question from me tonight. I just want to confirm, we didn't receive any correspondence and there was no public comment at the planning board hearing as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, Council Member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Springer? You're muted.
Thank you for your presentation. How long has the distributional facility been operating there?
It has been operating on the site since 1970, March 1970.
Thank you. That's all.
Anyone else? Okay. I now declare the hearing closed and the council will now deliberate. What is the council's pleasure? Colleagues, Councilmember Schultz?
Mr. Mayor, unless any other colleague has something they want to discuss, I'm prepared to make the motion, and I'm not seeing an indication from my colleagues. So with that, I will move that we introduce an ordinance of the Burbank City Council amending the zoning for the property located at 228 South Naomi Street from Media District High Density Residential to Media District General Business.
Second.
Councilmember Frutos seconds it. Any further discussion? Okay, move to a vote.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes.
Councilmember Frutos?
Yes.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Anthony?
Yes.
Mayor Talamantes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are 4 reports to council this evening. The first report is a review of the City Treasurer's Investment Portfolio Report for September 30th, 2021. City Treasurer Crystal Palmer will present this report. Welcome.
Share my screen. Can you see my screen?
No.
No. If you want, we can pull up my, can you please pull up my PowerPoint?
Working on it. I'm not working on it. Staff's working on it. There it is.
Well, good evening, Mayor Talamantes, Vice Mayor Anthony, Councilmember Frutos, Councilmember Springer, and Councilmember Schultz. My name is Crystal Palmer, and I'm your City Treasurer. Tonight, I will be going over the Treasurer's Report from September 2021. Just wanted to let you know that this report has been reviewed by both the internal Fiscal and Treasurer's Review Group and the external Treasurer's Oversight Review Committee. These committees meet twice a year to discuss our portfolio and they give me advice in terms of portfolio strategy and just the overall outlook for the portfolio. On the Treasurer's Oversight Review Committee, we have Darren Guggenheimer, CEO of Gain Federal Credit Union, Norland Carras, former CEO of Cedars-Sinai Federal Credit Union, Richard Martin, CPA, Scott Reif, retired Senior Vice President of Boston Private Bank and Trust, David Escobar, First Vice President of UBS Financial Services. And on the Fiscal and Treasurer's Review Group, we have Councilmember Frutos, Councilmember Schultz, Assistant City Manager Judy Wilke, City Manager Justin Hess, Financial Services Director Jennifer Becker, and CFO of BWP, Bob Liu. Just wanted to thank them for their time and support, as their advice has been really invaluable, especially in these uncertain times. Moving on to the Treasurer's Report, I will be going over the portfolio overview first, followed by economic conditions, and followed by the outlook and overall strategy. Portfolio overview. So looking at this graph, as you can see, as of the end of September 2021, the market value for the city's investment pool stands at $451 million, plus $7 million from our combined Successor agency and housing authority. Looking at the graph, we see the fluctuations every month as the market value changes with market movements, and as we receive property tax payments in April and May and December of every year. I also wanted to highlight that this reflects the CalPERS payments we had been making every year. So every year in July, we make CalPERS payments that save us money. So it was $43 million in July 2020, $42 million in July 2021, and next year we will be making $45 million in payments. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we see how the $451 million of market value is broken down by asset class. So the biggest chunk of the portfolio is wood LAIF at 42%, followed by corporate medium-term notes at 25%, U.S. Treasury notes 2%, U.S. agencies at 15%, negotiable CDs at 4%, supranationals at 2%, and municipal bonds at 9%. And next slide, please. So this shows how our portfolio allocation is in compliance with both our investment policy as well as the state legal maximum limits. So for each of the asset classes, you can see that the percentage is within the maximum limits as per our legal code. Next slide, please. So this graph shows the maturity range for our portfolio. So our maximum limit for investments is 5 years. So given that, our portfolio duration is 1.39 years, considering LAIF, but without LAIF, it's 2.43 years. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how our portfolio yield is in comparison with the 2-year Treasury 12-month rolling average and the LAIF average monthly yield. So if you can see, while Treasury yields have dropped significantly during the pandemic, the prudent structure of the portfolio has allowed the portfolio's return to be less volatile and should improve even more as rates continue to increase. So if you can see the spread in the past, our portfolio's yield has just barely improved over the 2-year Treasury, but now the spreads have actually increased significantly compared to our historical average. So we have been outperforming our benchmark, which has really been good for our portfolio. Next slide, please. This shows how much we've received from our portfolio over the past few years. So in September 2021, we received $432,000 in income. While this is lower than previous years, this has actually not dropped as much as the rates that we've been seeing for the 2-year Treasuries. Next slide, please. So if you remember, earlier this year, the council approved our 2021 investment policy, which for the first time in Burbank's history incorporates considerations for ESG or environmental, social, and governance criteria. I just wanted to highlight one of the investments we've done since then, which is the sustainable bond from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or IBIRD. So IBIRD is a lending arm of the World Bank. The net proceeds were used to finance eligible sustainable development projects designed to achieve positive social and environmental impacts with the goals of eliminating poverty and promoting prosperity, not only locally, but around the world. So what we like about this bond is that it's really organized in terms of really making sure that the money is used efficiently to look for projects that really benefit, both environmental and social issues. So they have a framework where they use 10 environmental and social standards. So sample projects include improvements to healthcare, nutrition, education, and job skills training, providing access to affordable housing, affordable financial products, climate mitigation, and promoting biodiversity conservation and sustainable water utilization. So this is something we're really proud of. And, Burbank taxpayers have peace of mind knowing that their money is going to something that's really worthwhile and helping people not only within Burbank, but also around the world. Next slide, please. So economic conditions. I will be going over the economic conditions of today so we can have a more broader context of where our portfolio stands. So unemployment and wages. So the big story this year is really the Great Resignation, as people call it. You can see 4.2 million workers quit their jobs in October, and job openings have actually increased to 11 million. Initial jobless claims are now at their lowest level in 52 years. The unemployment rate stands at 4.2% in November. So people have been quitting their jobs for various reasons. There's still fears of COVID, childcare issues, and more people are just choosing to be self-employed. There's also better opportunities out there. People are paying higher wages. As you can see on the right, wage increase are actually the highest now for blue collar and manual services jobs. So if you can see, service occupations are seeing 7% in terms of wage increase compared to only 2% for more managerial roles. With the impact of labor shortages, we are seeing the fastest wage growth in the US in 20 years. While this has been really good for workers, it has hurt small businesses though, as they try to keep their costs in line with their consumer expectations. Next slide, please. Household savings and retail sales. So another source for good news over the past year is really how much people have been able to save. So you can see the graph on the left with the fiscal stimulus people have received, they've increased their checking accounts, especially for the lowest income quartiles, by almost 100%. So people have been able to save a lot. Government aid will actually cut poverty almost 45% this year, with the poverty rate at an all-time low. Since the pandemic, excess savings buildup in the US has now accumulated to over $2.7 trillion. There's a lot of cash in the system and people are willing to spend. So you can see on the chart on the right, monthly retail sales have already increased 1.7% in October. Next slide, please. So that was the good news. The bad news is there's a lot of issues in terms of the supply chain, for instance. Freight rates on the left side, the key supply chain route from China to the West Coast has almost quadrupled in price over the past year. Not only that, is that the trucking industry is also short 80,000 drivers this year, and the shortage could surpass 160,000 in 2030. So if you look at the right side now, container ships are waiting longer and longer at the ports of both LA and Long Beach just to unload their cargo. So the number of ships per day at both ports have increased significantly from an average of maybe 10 to 20 several months ago to now 100 ships. Container ships wait an average of 21 days now just to enter the port of LA. So a lot of goods are now just sitting in the Pacific Ocean waiting, holiday supply, holiday goods, toys for kids, everything. Everything's just waiting right now, and we don't know when the supply chain issue will be resolved. Next slide, please. So the biggest issue that we see in the news nowadays is really inflation. It's something that we also see in our day-to-day lives as we go grocery shopping. So the latest consumer price index actually jumped to 6.8% in November, the highest in almost 40 years. So we haven't seen these levels of inflation since the 80s. Most people born nowadays don't even remember that. 6.8%, that's pretty huge. And not only that, we're not just seeing inflation per se, but also shadow inflation or shrinkflation or skimflation, whatever you want to call it. Basically, companies are giving smaller portions or cutting back on previously included service offerings just to keep their prices the same. So, if you go out now, there's no bread service, no tram service, no more included activities, same packaging, but if you look closely, much fewer ounces. No daily housekeeping, no hot breakfasts, new service fees, longer wait times. There's just not the same level of customer service as businesses are hurting from increased costs. Next slide, please. So we're seeing this inflation also in home sales. So if you look at the chart on the right, home sale prices are up 14% from 2020 to new record highs now. Asking prices of newly listed homes were up 11% and 43% of homes sold above list price. The problem is, if you can see on the right side, we're actually seeing fewer and fewer new listings. So new listings are down 7% from last year. Active listings, if you look for 2021, which is that red bar, is much less than the active listings from 2019 and 2020. So there's much less supply while demand has actually increased. So with a double whammy of that, 43% of pending sales are actually under contract within 2 weeks. And as we already saw, prices continue to increase. Next slide, please. So not only home prices, but overall asset prices have increased. So the S&P, for instance, is up 27% just from a year ago. Bitcoin, well, it's already pulled back. It's still up 244% from a year ago. There's just a lot of cash in the system right now, and it has to go somewhere. And a lot of people are dabbling in the stock market because where else are they going to put their cash? Next slide, please. So given the current economic environment, what is the outlook and strategy for the portfolio? Next slide. So ultimately, at the end of the day, our portfolio is really dependent on interest rates. In the past 6 months, what's really changed is the Federal Reserve's economic outlook. If you remember, the Fed dropped their rates early during the pandemic to zero, where it's really stayed since then. Just in the past year, the talk has always been that they won't raise rates until 2023, at the earliest, right? But what's changed is really this inflation and how much it has continued on. If you remember during my last report 6 months ago, we were talking about inflation being transitory. It's a temporary thing. It's not going to last very long. But now it looks like it's really going to stay for a long time. And even the Federal Reserve has admitted that. Just earlier in the month of November, the Federal Reserve actually announced that they will begin to taper their bond purchasing program just because inflation is getting out of control. The Fed is actually meeting today and tomorrow, where they are expected to even accelerate their tapering of their asset purchasing program. So what does that mean for rates? It means that right now people are expecting rates to increase probably by May of next year. If you can see the next slide, please. There is now a 69% probability of a rate hike by May of next year, and some people are even thinking 2 rate hikes by next year. So, well, that's really good for our portfolio because rates have increased significantly just in the past few months, and we are expecting that rates should increase even more next year. That might also cause an economic slowdown because for businesses, that means it's going to cost more money to borrow for their businesses. It's going to cost more for people buying homes. Mortgage rates are going to increase. Auto loans, credit card interest rates, everything's going to increase with that. So that's really, waiting to see what will happen with that. And hopefully the goal is that will control the inflation as we go into the next year. Next slide, please. So this is the latest IMF World Economic Outlook. They are projecting a 5.9% growth for this year and a slower growth of 4.9% next year. So as we enter the new year, there's really two main questions. One is inflation. So this has primarily impacted advanced economies. Like, are we going to be able to control this runaway inflation? So the problem with inflation is that it's something that could spiral out of control, right? So as workers see inflation when they go grocery shopping, they are going to demand higher wages from their employers. The problem is when they get higher wages, that means the costs for businesses go up. So businesses will now have to charge more for goods. And then when those same workers go out and they see even higher prices, they will have to ask for higher wages. So it's this like out of control movement that could really spiral, out of control. And the other question is supply chain, right? Are we going to be able to fix the supply chain issues we've seen earlier this year? The other main question is still this uncertainty over COVID. We've seen this new Omicron variant, the winter surge with new restrictions being imposed in Europe again. So are we back to the same place? That's the question. And for lower income countries, another issue is they really don't have the same level of access to vaccinations that we do. So what's going to happen to them in the next few years? Next slide, please. So in conclusion, given what we know about the current market conditions, our strategy is really to just keep in mind that at the end of the day, we shouldn't get phased and know that our priority should still be safety, liquidity, and yield. So safety. One thing to keep in mind is that times are changing. The companies that have done well in the past are not always going to be the same companies that will do well in the future. So that's why it's really important to do our due diligence whenever we make investments, as well as continue to look at our current holdings to make sure that what we own are still financially sound and stable companies. Next is liquidity. It's really important to have ample liquidity to really take advantage of rising rates, as well as to meet our cash flow requirements. With the increase in yields, we should have enough liquidity to take advantage of rising rates to make sure that we're protected against inflation. And at the end of the day, our job is really to make sure that we have enough cash to meet our city services. And yield, finally yield. It's one of our important strategies is really to dollar cost average while investing opportunistically during these volatile times. With the increase in inflation, it's really important to maximize yield because at the end of the day, you have inflation and then there's these, rates that you are earning for your portfolio. But what is the real rate that you're really earning given inflation, right? So if inflation is at 5% and your portfolio is earning only 1%, you're actually losing money in terms of the real value of your earnings. So it's really important to maximize that yield so we're not losing that real value of the portfolio. So basically that concludes my report. I believe this is a note and file, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Ms. Palmer, thank you very much for the report. Very detailed and up to the moment. Colleagues, any questions, comments? Councilmember Springer?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Palmer, for your report, and thank you for outperforming the benchmarks. So are we positive then if inflation is like 6% and do we have a positive yield?
Well, our yield right now is about, I'd say 1.2%, right? And rates should increase in the next year. Inflation compared to the previous year is at 6%. So when you look at it that way, no, we would not have a positive yield. But because of our limitations, we cannot really invest in instruments, just stock market equities that would beat inflation.
So we just have to wait for inflation to decline to increase our yield then, or our net yield.
Yes, in terms of the real yield. Our yield is still positive, but if you look at inflation and if you really calculate real yield, then yeah, no, it would be negative.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Treasurer Palmer, for this extensive report. I mean, it's worrisome for our small businesses, they can't, roll with the punches as easy as the big boys with this inflation. Do you have any recommendations for people watching at home? What should they do? Where should they put their money? These people are looking at, real short-term end-over-end returns at the cash register, so they're kind of worried.
Well, first for the small businesses, right? I think it's really important that they look at their costs and try to, I guess, see opportunities where they can save money. It's something that I also do personally, because at the end of the day, not all companies have actually increased their costs. I personally have found this one restaurant in Burbank that still offers the same prices as pre-pandemic. So I go to support that restaurant, because they want to make the money and on volume, which I think it's fair, and they want to do the best by their customers. So I think it's really looking for these opportunities, right? So for instance, there are, brighter signs, I guess. So for instance, this is something too specific maybe, but pomegranates. Pomegranates, for some reason, have actually declined in price in terms of in the past few months. And do you know why? Because of the supply chain issues. Normally, we export all these pomegranates to other countries, but because there are not enough ships to export these pomegranates, they're all stuck here in California. Now we have too many pomegranates, so prices have actually decreased. So my advice for people is to, try to see where the opportunities are. We personally cannot control the prices we see, but we have a choice in terms of where we put our dollars, and we should support these businesses and these restaurants that continue to offer, a fair price for their services. So that would be my advice for, anyone listening right now.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Palmer, great report. Thank you. Just one question. I'm not an economist, but I think that one trend that we might start to see in the months and the years ahead is the localization of the supply chain, or the compression of the supply chain, to avoid some of the issues that we're seeing around the country, around the world. Have you looked at, could that inform our investment strategy moving forward? Are there any potential opportunities if we do see that shift from more globalized economy to the localization of supply? So one thing that we were actually looking at a few weeks ago, just in terms of bonds, you're speaking about localization. So microchips, for instance, normally they're all manufactured in Taiwan, right? But we have to wait for these chips to come to the US on these freight ships. A lot of these companies are starting to manufacture them here in the US. So they're building factories in Texas, in Arizona, and they are selling bonds that could finance the construction of these factories. So these are some of the changes, like you mentioned, with the localization. These are new opportunities for us in terms of investments. And the good thing is, by investing in these are factories that would, enable U.S. Consumers to have, more, keep the jobs in their local economy. So that's something we're really excited about. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Frutos?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Palmer, right now with everything that we're looking at and the possible interest rates going up, is there any thoughts from your office on any liabilities that we have that we might have to refinance now to keep the lowest interest rate for the next 30 years? Or what is your assessment on that?
So I actually spoke with both our financial services director and the CFO of BWP. In terms of city bonds, we actually do not have any long-term bonds right now that we could refinance to take advantage of these lower rates. However, with BWP, they are actually in the process of refinancing one of their bonds so that we could save some money there in terms of our interest payments. So that's something I'm working with them, currently. So thank you for bringing that up.
And liquidity, how much money are we required to have cash on hand to keep us for 90 days in the event of emergency? What's that number?
So right now, we're required to keep about 8 weeks of liquidity, and we have significantly more than what is required. So what's required is more in the 80 to 100 million range, and we actually, like I mentioned, we have $200-300 million. So we're very safe right now.
Oh, great.
I'm
Thank
not
you, Ms.
worried about it.
If you're not worried, I'm not worried. Thank you, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? I've got a question, Ms. Palmer. Are there any bond funds or investments that we can invest that would beat inflation?
So there is something called the inflation protected securities. The problem is that's really for retail investors, and there's a maximum of $10,000 in terms of what you can put in. That earns 7% right now. So if anyone has $10,000 they want to invest in, you can do that. The only problem with that is we were actually just talking about that the other day, is that you're locked in for 5 years. So while rates right now are 7%, they're not necessarily going to be 7% 3-4 years from now. So that's just something to consider. But I wish there was a silver bullet where we could just beat inflation just like that. But like everyone else, we're in the same boat. That's why stock market is the way it is right now. People just feel that that's the only place they can park their money.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I was hoping you'd provide us some names or some companies that. But anyway, any other questions by my colleagues? Well, thank you very much. I believe this is a note and file. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The second report is the update of the Development Impact Fee Nexus Study. Mr. David Kriske, Assistant Community Development Director, please present the report. Welcome, Mr. Kriske.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Once again, members of the City Council, my name is David Kriske with the Community Development Department. I'm going to share my screen for a presentation for the second study session, and then we'll open up for questions. So just give me one moment. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So tonight, we are here to, tonight's staff is here to give a further information on the city's development impact fees. This second study session follows an earlier study session we had actually way back in February of 2020, where we introduced the concepts of development impact fees or DIFs, talked about our current program and the process for updating them. Today, we're going to review some of that information because two of the council members were not on the council at the time we came last before you, and also just to refresh the entire council on the issue of DIFs because it continues to be an item of interest of the councils. So to do that tonight, I'm going to first review what development impact fees are, or DIFs, going to give an update of our current program, as well as the update that we've conducted, the analysis that we've conducted to see how we can update our DIFs. And then I'm going to lead into answering some questions that the council had back in February of 2020 related to our DIFs and the updates. And we'll go through the information that the council requested to provide some further insight into updating our program. And then finally, I'll outline the next steps and give our staff recommendation for moving forward. And as we talked about in the first study session, and we feel is still important for the council to consider when updating the development impact fees, we request that the council consider these policy considerations when ultimately deciding how and when to update the fees. We think that any decision should align the fee levels of the DIFs with our other city goals. We have lots of other goals in terms of economic development, in terms of providing housing, in terms of providing a fiscally sound city, and providing the required services that our residents and businesses enjoy. And we think that updating the DIF should align with that, with those other goals. We think that updating DIF should balance the need for fees and the need for supporting infrastructure with our other bigger goal to build neighborhoods and build communities here in Burbank. And we're going to talk about how there's a trade-off in that regard. And then finally, we think that DIFs should continue to facilitate what the council has done with many of our projects, which is to provide community benefits that the community as a whole enjoys when new development occurs in the city. And the DIFs can support that effort. So what are DIFs? Again, just to give a background on development impact fees. What development impact fees do is they address new development's impact on the city's capital infrastructure, and they allow the city to monetarily collect funding to improve and address those infrastructure deficiencies that are caused by new development. One important thing, the biggest important thing to know about development impact fees is there needs to be a reasonable connection between the fee and the fee charged and the impact caused by the development. You can't just set the fee to maximize revenue without some analysis showing how the fee is justified, and that's what the state law for DIFs requires, and it's the study that we conducted to show that connection. And then the fee needs to be proportional. So the fee needs to relate to the size of the development. It can't be just a fixed fee on anything. It needs to be proportionate to how the size of the development and its impact on the city infrastructure. Also, important things to remember when talking about DIFs, they are restricted funds. They are not part of the general fund. We need to separate that development impact fee money into a separate account and spend it on specific projects identified in the study that sets the fee. So you can't fund just any general fund type of activity. It needs to be specific capital improvements. And the DIFs need to address existing, or the DIFs cannot address existing infrastructure deficiencies. They can only address the deficiencies caused by new development. Deficiencies that already exist just from our existing growth and development need to be funded with other funding sources. And then also another thing that you need to think about with DIFs is they can only fund capital infrastructure. They can't fund operations or maintenance or recurring operational expenditures. So when you build a capital facility, you have to keep in mind that you have to find other funding to operate and maintain that facility. And then finally, the funds received through the city's DIF program are dependent and come in at the rate the development comes in. So if economic cycles are such that development declines or stops or is delayed, the revenue doesn't come in on a regular basis. It only comes in when those developments are approved and pull permits for construction. So our city's current development impact fee program was established way back in 1993, and we've done a lot to improve the city's infrastructure in those intervening years. The fee is divided up into several capital infrastructure categories, and they're listed below. We divide them into community facilities, which are library, parks, police, and fire, and then transportation facilities are directed towards transportation infrastructure. And so there's really kind of two categories, but then the community facilities category is further divided into different elements. And then the photos here just represent some of the infrastructure that has been built in part with development impact fees, and it runs across the gamut between transportation to community facilities. So why does staff recommend that the council update the development impact fee program? Well, as I noted, the last update was back when the fee program was established in 1993, and there are many projects on the study that was used for those fees, the original fees, that have been completed. We are continuing to work on projects still that are relevant from that study, such as the Empire Interchange and other transportation infrastructure. But it's important to update the study to incorporate the general plan land use assumptions and to revise the infrastructure projects list to make sure that the infrastructure needs are updated in line with the new development that we're experiencing today. It is important that we prepare a new development impact fee Nexus study. That's the study, the analytical study that's required to set a development impact fee. That has been prepared and it was used to calculate the proposed fees that we'll be presenting this evening. Part of that includes completing technical documentation to support the update. So that's identifying the growth forecast in the general plan, identifying the infrastructure that needed for that to support that growth, calculating the costs that we expect to spend to build that infrastructure, and identifying all the funding sources, other funding sources that are needed to complement the diffs to build that infrastructure. And what our study did for the update is it identified the maximum legally allowable fees that the city council could charge new development based on that analysis. And there's a variety of reasons where we may not want to charge exactly the maximum, but the fee limits that we have here to show you are the maximally allowable charges that the Nexus study supports. So as I said, the study identifies the maximum allowable fees, but it does not determine what the city should charge. That's a city council decision that should be made based upon those earlier policy considerations that I talked about. You have the power to adopt fees at or below the maximum levels. And we're hopefully going to help the council and the community identify what that level should be, should the council direct us tonight to move forward with drafting an ordinance to actually update the fees. So to kind of give an overview at a very high level of how the Nexus study process works. First, we estimated the future population and employment growth that we expect based on our general plan. And in our case, it's the Burbank 2035 general plan that was adopted by the council back in 2013. We identify the infrastructure and capital facility improvements needed to address the growth that we expect from the general plan. We develop very high level cost estimates. These are very order of magnitude cost estimates for all of the capital needs. We then allocate the cost between existing and new development. As I mentioned, the impact fees can only fund the portion of the capital improvement that's needed by new development. It can't support the portion of the improvement that's supporting existing deficiency. And an example that I can give in that helps explain that is if we are constructing a new intersection improvement that is adding roadway capacity along an arterial. Well, some of that roadway capacity is going to be used and is needed by new development that's coming as part of the expected growth in the general plan. But some of that capacity is being used to address the existing traffic that we already experience at that location that's caused by all the existing development. And the impact fees can't cover that part of it. So it has to proportion it out between existing and new development. And then we distribute those costs in a per capita basis towards the residential and non-residential uses that we expect. So this is how we take basically the amount of the infrastructure costs that are attributable to new development, and we divide it by the amount of development to get either a cost per square foot or a cost per unit that's then distributed across new development proportionally as it occurs. And that's back to the proportionality requirement of impact fees. And then we also may charge a 5% administrative fee to actually collect the fee, process the fee, administer and do the reporting for the fee. And we do that today. So staff's Nexus study proposes the following capital improvement categories. We're proposing to continue all of the existing categories in the current fee program with the addition of an IT fee. And that means that we will keep the same categories, but we are updating all of the projects and infrastructure that's needed across those categories. And so the proposed improvement types in the Nexus study include things like additional park facilities at our parks, new books and materials and facilities to improve our libraries, new police and fire equipment, apparatus, and other improvements needed to allow our police and fire departments to address impacts caused by new development. It includes additional roadway, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian improvements that are needed for new development. And an important area here is because of our complete streets plan that the council adopted last year, we feel that it's important to broaden the types of improvements that are addressing the transportation needs of new development, so that we're addressing all modes in our transportation network and not just focusing on a single mode. So the project list includes a broadened category of improvements. And then I mentioned a new fee for information technology to help the city deploy information technology across the city for things like parking management or other IT-aware infrastructure that needs communication and IT support as we address new development. The study identified that of the total project costs or capital costs, DIFs can support and pay for about a third of those costs, which means the other 2/3 of those costs, or 70%, needs to come from other funding sources. And that's what we do for our current fee program. We use general fund, we use other types of funding available to the city. In the transportation realm especially, we use grant funds for a lot of augmentation to our DIFs. And so whenever we're collecting DIFs, we always have to be mindful and have an understanding that other funding sources need to be combined with the DIFs to actually build the projects. And we continue to do that with our current program and would propose to do it with our new program. So moving further into the Nexus Study findings, we have the analysis showed that the new maximum development impact fee level for residential projects is higher than what we charge currently. These show the community, this table shows the community facilities fee and the transportation fees that could be maximally charged on residential units on a per unit basis. And these are the non-residential price fees per square foot, the maximum charges we could apply to non-residential land uses such as offices, industrial, retail, institutional, and lodging. And so you can see the range of fee levels as shown here. This table shows the maximum allowable fee that we calculated under the Nexus study for the new update as compared to our existing fees. And so as you can see, some of the fees could go up dramatically, particularly the single and multifamily fees. The retail fee could go up quite dramatically. Others could go up, but not necessarily a whole lot higher. We're somewhat in line in some of the other categories, but all of our existing fees could be raised based on the revised infrastructure assumptions and the growth forecasts in our general plan as compared to what we calculated back in 1993. Once adopted, or even with our current program, but if a new program were to be adopted, DIFs are updated annually, so you don't just set it and forget it. You can update all of the fee categories based on accounting for inflation or cost increases due to construction. We adjust it based on a CPI adjustment factor. We've been doing that every year since 92 or 93, so the fees have gone up, but they haven't changed to reflect new infrastructure, and that's what the annual, or that's what the new update would do. But then once adopted, we would be updating or asking the City Council to update the fees to account for cost increases. One other thing we think that the council may wish to consider when adopting a new fee program, if you give staff that direction, is we've got specific plans also working through the analysis, which will be coming before the City Council in calendar year 2022. And we recommend that based on the council's desire to adopt those specific plans, you may wish to come back in a shorter time frame than we did previously and update the development impact fees further to account for those specific plans and any infrastructure identified in the specific plans. But the update from the current Nexus study that we're presenting to you today and that we would recommend the council move forward on is based on the current general plan and not yet the specific plans. And then finally, there is a new state law that will be going into effect in 2022 that requires Nexus studies to be updated every 8 years. So we can't go 20 years from a Nexus study like we have currently. The state has said, no, you need to go update your infrastructure lists and your assumptions every 8 years, at least take a look at it and re-establish your fee program at least every 8 years. And so the council would be required to do that regardless of whether they adopted the fees or not. So one of the questions that the council asked back in February of 2020 is how would diffs, the new diffs or the existing versus the new diffs affect typical residential projects? And so what we show in this table is kind of an order of magnitude cost to a typical kind of a small, medium, and large residential project to show how the existing diff revenue expands with the size of the project and how the new max allowable diff revenue could expand if you adopted the maximum fee. And again, you may not want to do that, but if you did, this is how it would go. So obviously, because it's per unit or per square foot, it increases linearly. It's a pretty simple relation, but it shows kind of how the magnitude of fees that are charged for kind of a small little, fourplex versus a large, 400 unit project under our current and future diffs. And you can see it broken out by capital facilities and transportation. One thing to note in our existing program is we do not charge a transportation diff on residential projects. I'm not sure what the reason for that was back 25 years ago. It could be because we are such a jobs-rich, housing-lacking community that this was a way to incentivize and reduce transportation impacts by bringing jobs closer to, or housing closer to jobs. But for whatever reason, the council at the time decided not to charge a transportation fee on residential. You could certainly charge one as part of the update. A second question that the council had was listing diffs charged versus potentially other community benefits gathered from recent large development projects. And so this table shows some 4 recent notable larger projects and how the diffs under the current program were charged versus community benefits negotiated for these projects that were all planned developments or at least had some discretionary entitlement as part of their approval. And so as you can see, in some cases, the diffs outweigh the community benefits, but in other cases, the community benefits far outweighed the diffs collected. And this is not to say that one replaces the other. Diff infrastructure versus broader community benefits they don't replace one another. They're complementary, and that's back to the policy items that we are asking the council to think about with this. In some cases, the project for either the type of entitlement it was asking for or where it was located or how it interfaced with the community, we were able to garner community benefits well in excess of the development impact fees, while in other cases, the development impact fees were the major revenue from the project. And going forward, as you know, projects are less likely or may not be coming to you with a planned development and may be streamlined under various state laws and regulations. And so falling back on diff is a way to ensure that those more ministerial or by right projects still pay their fair share when it comes to infrastructure, which is why diff is important, but it also should complement the other community benefits that we get. And then finally, the last item of information that the council wanted some further clarification on is how our diffs compare to our neighboring cities. And in this case, we looked at Glendale and Pasadena. And so this table is a little busy, but it shows how our current fee and our proposed new max allowable fee compare to that of our neighbors across capital facilities and across transportation. One thing that the staff report talks about is that it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison. In particular, you will note, and I think it's even come up in terms of public comments we've gotten this year and the last couple of years about the rates charged on residential developments for our diffs versus our neighbors. And we talk in the staff report about why those are different. And the main difference why the cities of Glendale and Pasadena's capital facility fees are so much higher than Burbank's is because those cities both assess very high fees to acquire new land for new parks. It's something that Burbank chooses to address its park needs not by acquiring new land, but by making improvements to our existing parks. But Glendale and Pasadena have a very high fee to acquire land for parks, and that's primarily the difference why their fees are for residential are so much higher than ours. If you were to take away that park land acquisition portion of Glendale and Pasadena's fees, our fees would be higher. And we collect fees for a broader category of infrastructure. So that's a main difference why the residential fees are so much higher. And they would be even higher still, even if we adopted the new maximum allowable fee, Glendale's and Pasadena's would still be higher for multifamily. On non-residential, we're a little bit closer. We're still a little low in some categories on our existing fee, but not by a whole lot. And particularly, I would say our transportation fee, it's higher than Glendale's. Glendale doesn't even have one. And it's comparable to Pasadena's. That's our existing one. And our max allowable fees that could be charged could raise us higher than our neighbors if the council so chose for non-residential land uses. So while the residential is lower than our neighbors, the non-residential fees currently are comparable, and they could be higher if the council chose to implement the higher end of the scale. So I just wanted to clarify and explain the differences across the three cities. And this is just some summary of our diffs versus neighboring cities. As I mentioned, our diff program is more comprehensive and covers more types of facilities. Pasadena's and Glendale's residential fees are primarily for parkland acquisition. And we think that our transportation diff is comparable to Pasadena, and Glendale currently doesn't have one. So that kind of summarizes the differences with us and our neighbors. So with that, our staff recommendation for this evening is twofold. One, we'd like to receive the City Council's policy direction and input on moving forward with the updated development impact fee program, given the information in this study session and some of the policy considerations that we think are important. We are hoping to get some broad council direction on how to move forward. And then more specifically, we're asking you to direct staff to bring back an updated DIF program, which includes the ordinance required and the other procedures necessary, including noticing, to adopt new DIFs with a new Nexus Study, new project list, and new assumptions. And we'd like to come back to you in the first half of 2022 with that draft ordinance, with that ordinance, if the City Council so desires. And with that concludes my staff presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Mr. Krisky, thank you very much for that report. Very detailed report on diffs. I know a lot more about diffs now than I did before. Colleagues, any questions, comments? Vice Mayor Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Krisky. That was very extensive, and the report was also very extensive. I wanted to ask just a couple of quick questions. The money that we have diffs for, you said we use a wide variety, including community facilities. Are we allowed to use diff money for affordable housing projects or possibly homeless services or homeless infrastructure?
So our current fee program does not have an affordable housing component in it. The proposed fee program, the Nexus Study for which I presented on this evening, does not have it. However, we have a companion study that was completed that does calculate a potential affordable housing fee that could be charged to, again, commercial and non-commercial development if the City Council so desired. We'd like to bring that to you on a separate track because that fee has a very high range that you could charge because affordable housing is so expensive that the legal nexus gives you a fee that's just very, very high. And what at least most cities do is they look at that high legal fee, but then they bring back and say, okay, well, what do we want to fund for affordable housing? How does that relate to other ways we get affordable housing, such as through affordable housing built with development projects, which is a easier way to get affordable housing, and really set that limit intelligently. So we do want to bring that back to you on a separate track also in 2022. At the end of the day, if both were adopted, it'd be just a comprehensive list, but the affordable housing fee has a nuance to it because of the high cost of providing housing that we think it should be looked at separately, and then have the council weigh in on whether to bring that forward, in parallel or shortly thereafter.
The reason why I asked that, if you could you put up that slide again where you show the diffs and the community projects put together by the planned developments?
Yes.
There was like 4 different projects there. The reason I bring up that question is if we wanted to start charging for community facilities, not just affordable housing, but all, green space and bikeways and, all of that you can see in the table there, some of our planned developments through our negotiations get a lot of those community facilities, and often at a much cheaper price if we simply charged the diffs and built them ourselves. But to a comment that you made earlier, a lot of the stuff we're seeing is not, like in the coming years, it's not going to be planned developments. It's going to be general planned land use by right. It's going to be, state sanctioned affordable housing projects where they supersede local control. And so for me, moving forward in this discussion, I'd like to see about how we can use the diffs sort of as a leverage point to get these community benefits. And I'll talk more about that after I finish with my questions. So I'm gonna refer back to this a little bit later when we have our discussions. Questions right now. The transportation fee on residential, you said we don't charge that at all. And obviously we're 3-to-1 jobs to housing ratio. We can set our transportation, if we want to implement a transportation fee, we can set that at any rate separate from whatever increase we do on the other portion of the diff, right? They're not bound to each other.
Yes, they can all be set independently based on the, how they relate to other policies that you may want to interact with.
Okay. And then legally speaking, we're not in any trouble if, say, I'm not saying we're going to, but if you say across the board, we raise all of them to the maximum, including the transportation, including also, like the study the Nexus study you put together, that's gonna protect us for those fees that we want to set.
I would say yes. However, our consultants do point out that they recommend you could set certainly a very high fee. They recommend you think very cautiously about setting the max, because the way you use the fees to fund all that infrastructure and have to find the other funding sources, it's very fluid and it's over a very long time horizon. So if you're charging the max, but then you're not very aggressively, I think, pursuing all the projects, then you may open yourself to somebody challenging the fee and saying, hey, you're collecting the max, but you're not building all the projects. And it's very hard to build all, we put a lot of the projects that we know we need in there, but it's very hard to simultaneously, I think, pursue all of them and gather all the other funding. So our consultants have said, you should take pause if you want to charge the maximum. You may want to back off at least somewhat, just because infrastructure planning is not so linear and strict, that it's very kind of fluid related to other opportunities that come and other funding sources. So they do caution on setting the maximum, but you could set within the range and have it defended by the study.
I see their city attorney is on as well.
I would just, to add a little bit of detail to what Mr. Krisky's saying, you're actually also under a time crunch. So development impact fees have a 5-year deadline to spend them from when they're collected. So on the report that you had earlier this evening, where it was showing diff fee fund balances, that's an exercise that staff has to go through to show money in, money out, or the city owes developers refunds of fees not spent within the 5-year period of time. So to what David Kriski's saying, it's not only capacity for the total program, but it's capacity over a relatively short period of time if you're talking about a large infrastructure project. And I only refer to the Empire interchange and how long some large capital improvement projects can take.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, are there any known projects or other cities that have projects that can apply for exemptions to diffs? Like if we're building a new library, we don't pay our own diffs. If the school district is building a new facility, like do they get a pass? Like how does that work? Are there exemptions to this at all?
So if the council's interested in that, we can explore that more thoroughly. But you could, in theory, set your fee up in a way that allows an exemption in lieu of that project providing a similar or other piece of infrastructure that's related. And I would also add that one element that our current program has, which is not requested often, but if a developer is directly building one of the projects on the list, they may ask the city, well, can I build the project in lieu of the fee and get like a credit off of it? And that is in our current fee and is something we could consider moving forward. So you could build flexibility in that way. And if the council can give us some, if at least, a majority of the council can give us some direction broadly about what you're interested in, we can go back and do some further analysis to see how to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I like that flexibility. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm done for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Springer?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kriski, for your presentation. So we can have both, is that right? Like if we say we have a streamlined project coming in and we'll have our set of diffs where we can't negotiate, like the development agreement, so we can just give the developer the list of what the fees are, right? Because we have the diff list. But if somebody wants to go through plan development, then we negotiate. Or we could use the diffs there also, or a combination.
So under our current program, all projects are assessed development impact fees, and it's all based on the per square foot or the per unit. In addition, projects that are requesting a plan development who are asking for additional entitlement above and beyond the zoning and are negotiating with us in exchange for community benefits, they then can negotiate with us for community benefits on top of the diffs. So you can plan developments do have both. However, in my point about balancing those, at the end of the day, a project is only going to be kind of financially supportable to a certain limit. So you can't necessarily set a very high diff and then expect the same level of community benefits that we might have gotten in the past, because at some point the project just doesn't work and it just ends. So there's some balance because you can't just load it up maximally for both. If you have high diffs, you may get a little bit less community benefit. But yeah, all projects would be assessed diffs, and then plan developments could negotiate with the city for additional community benefits on top of that, which is what's happened in the past.
Oh, so that's what our practice has been.
Yes.
Because and so I would just direct staff to just make sure that our fees reflect a development's fair share of infrastructure costs, and also to offset the impacts of development in the city. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Frutos and then Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One, I definitely agree with Councilmember Springer. I like to see the staff come back with the study comparing us, just like the residents want. They want us to fairly, do the diffs on developers building these better neighborhoods. So I definitely like to see where we can raise our fees to be equitable with the other cities, because that's the biggest perception from the residents every time there's a big development moving forward, is that it's a free giveaway. So definitely that's my first one. My second one would be to definitely see what staff comes back with transportation diffs, just because it seems like every single project, especially what's coming out of Sacramento, is all related to transit. And they're getting the bonuses and everything, which the residents really get upset. But if we're truly having to follow the law, then I would like to see the diffs transportation, because I know, Mr. Krisky, you're trying to get me that trolley bus as a new transportation for the city. And definitely, like I said, I'd like to see the study of single family diffs and multifamily diffs, because that's what's being built. But on the flip side of the coin, I do have to commend staff, because I like our inclusionary housing policy, because I don't think it's cost effective from the diffs to put that money there for 5 years and we're under the time, and our property here to develop some type of supported housing by ourselves. It's just going to cost us more money than being realistic to have them included in that new development project with the 55-year agreement. So on that, I really support staff and what they're doing. And I think that's my 2 cents to give you guys direction. But most important, I just want to be fair to the developers, where the public knows that, hey, they are paying their fair share. And I'd like to see where you come back, where we sit now in between Glendale and Pasadena. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Schultz, what's next?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to staff for a thorough report and good presentation. I agree with the direction, the comments made by Councilmember Springer and seconded by Councilmember Frutos. Just a couple things I wanted to add and clarify. So just putting it bluntly, brass tacks, we can't, and correct me if I'm wrong, we cannot use development impact fees as a shield against development, correct?
No, no, and in fact, that puts us at risk in a different way, that if it's being perceived by the state that we're being restrictive, that could be an issue. So no, it needs to complement and pay. They need to be used to pay the developer's fair share of their impacts, and that's the goal.
Good. Okay, and all the more reason I agree with Councilmember Springer. That is certainly what I would hope to see, that they pay their fair share. So a couple details about the Nexus study I wanted to ask. So the first thing I noticed is that our previous Nexus study was done in 1993. Is that right?
Yes.
So I noticed that Assembly Bill 602 is now requiring cities like Burbank to redo that every 8 years. This is a question I've been asked, and I know I will be asked again. Why didn't we update it since 1993? What was the explanation there?
I think this is just my offering of my perspective based on working here in some related activities, as well as the impact fees. I think a lot of our projects were, at least in the transportation realm, were very long-term. Empire Interchange has been in development since the late 90s, and we just finished it about a year or so ago. And then the way we eventually got to adopting our Burbank 2035 general plan in 2013, that was a process that was underway probably 10 or more years in advance, and that for a variety of reasons, the city took a while to kind of focus on what it felt were its values and its growth forecasts that needed to be developed to go into that Burbank 2035 general plan. And because the general plan, I think, took a long time, and the general plan is a major component to the impact fee Nexus study, that was, I think, a main reason why it took so long. Obviously, from 2013 to 2021, 2022 is still a long time. And I would say that we ideally would have been bringing this back to you sooner. But because of the nature of how we identify the infrastructure needed and how it relates to the general plan, and then in the last, quite frankly, year or so, we've been grappling with how to maybe address the specific plans in one fell swoop, and maybe we want to delay the update even further. But we kind of, at a staff level, said, you know what? No, it's important to update this for a variety of reasons, including the new state law. And so let's get a new fee on the books with the current general plan, and the council can always go back after the specific plans are adopted if it makes sense, and amend it further. So I think that's what our recommended approach is going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Krisky. And then as a follow-up, and you don't need to throw the slide up here, but if I remember correctly from slide 16, what staff was also recommending is that once you come back, assuming an ordinance is adopted, we update the fees, that they would be updated every year to account for inflation and other adjustment factors. Is that right?
Yes, and they have been doing that even under our current fee, even since from 92. Every year we make an adjustment. You adopt it as part of the fee schedule with the budget, and so it's been marching upwards this whole time. But yes, we would continue to do that.
Okay, great. That was the one thing I wanted to just add to what Councilmember Springer had mentioned. Just a couple more questions. So when you were talking about the Nexus study, you mentioned that the first step you take is to estimate future population. And part of that was reliance on the general plan, Burbank 2035 general plan. So just so the public's clear, did that include an estimate for our current council goal of adding 12,000 units of housing by the end of the general plan period?
No, it does not. And so we would be coming back with the specific plans because that's where the rubber hits the road for updating the general plan to account for the 12,000 housing unit goal. You've set the goal, but now we have to ensconce it in the plans, and that would be through the specific plans. And then we would recommend you turn around and run the analysis on the Nexus fee again to incorporate that new housing assumption.
Got it. Thank you for breaking it down. The last question I have, and then I'll cede the floor, is I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the separate issue of the affordable housing diff. I won't get too far down that rabbit hole because I know that'll be coming back. But just because it's in the report, can you just give me a little more information? Are other cities taking those measures? And similarly, when we talk about an affordable housing diff, I mean, is that for land acquisition and construction of affordable housing, or what would the money go towards?
So yeah, to get into the Nexus legal analysis and how we get to a affordable housing fee, what you do for affordable housing in a diff is just like you do for any other infrastructure. You have new growth that's occurring, commercial growth, for example, and that new growth brings upon it a demand for affordable housing. And in the case of the Nexus study, or the affordable housing part of the analysis we did, it's when new growth comes in, that brings a certain additional employees to work in Burbank. And some of those employees will live in Burbank, and a certain percentage of those employees will have an income level that's below a level that they can either rent or purchase a typical house at the typical housing price. And so therefore there's an affordable housing need for that subset. And then what the Nexus study does next is it calculates, well, how much would it cost to build affordable housing and subsidized housing for that number of people? And then you do the math, just like we do for the other infrastructure. You divide that total cost divided by the square footage of the new development or the new growth, and you get an assignable value of a cost per square foot to provide affordable housing to a segment of the employees brought into Burbank by that housing development. And as you can imagine, the costs are so high to do affordable housing that the cost per square foot it's almost nonsensical. It's in the hundreds of dollars a square foot, which all projects would not pencil, would not be able to be built at the max. And so what at least one city we know of, Glendale, has done is they took that max and then they said, what's a reasonable fee that could be charged below that max that still gives us some revenue to pursue affordable housing projects or combine with other funding sources that doesn't completely cripple new development, which would also not be good policy and may not be particularly legal either. And so they set a very much lower level per square foot to fund affordable housing projects that then the city could combine with other funding and pursue. And so that's at least how Glendale has done it. And it's something that could be mirrored here, taking a reasonable fee level and looking at our other affordable housing funding sources and combining that with the affordable housing we get through like inclusionary housing and other things to see where we lie in terms of where we want to set that fee.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kriske. So I'll just close in saying that I agree with the direction that Councilmember Springer is proposing. The only thing I would add is that, just speaking for myself, that is something I would like to further explore, whether or not it might make sense to have an affordable housing diff as a component. And I look forward to hearing that report next year.
Thank you. I've got a question that you mentioned, Mr. Kriske, about flexibility that's already built into our code. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So this may have been in relation to the transportation fee. We want to make sure that the projects that we are identifying as supporting new growth covers the gamut of transportation projects that we want to see through our other policy documents. And so the new fee, we think it's important, particularly in transportation, to update that project list to reflect the broad needs of transportation that we need, so that the DIF can fund different types and larger variety of projects going forward once the new fee is adopted. So if you've got a DIF that's all roads, you can't use DIFs to fund pedestrian improvements or complete streets improvements. So we want to make sure that the project list reflects the current policy of the council for how we address transportation with the different types of transportation projects that we pursue, so we can use the DIF for all different types of projects.
Is this just related to transportation? That's what you've been saying.
I think all the fees have that broadening to be more flexible. The transportation ones are the ones I'm most familiar with, obviously, but we looked at and other staff in the city looked across all the other categories, also in terms of police, fire. So, for example, police and fire, that's the most inflexible right now. If the police and fire DIF can only fund kind of the payback for the cost that we incurred to build the police fire headquarters way back in '98. You can't spend it on other improvements, even though we have other infrastructure needs. So the new DIF, if the council moves forward, has a much bigger variety for fire, for instance, it's apparatus, it's improvements to equipment in the existing stations, it's new trucks, it's a larger variety of improvements so that we can use the DIF to fund a variety of needs rather than just that one singular one.
Now, can there be a trade-off for a developer when there's, let's say, for example, we have high diffs, but he's willing to provide a park, some kind of community benefit? Can we lower this diff, the fees, to compensate for that community benefit that he's providing to the community?
So I know if we kind of knew, or if the council kind of knew in advance the types of infrastructure that we want developers to potentially consider building for us, say parks is a priority, and so we want to see development come forward that helps to build parks near it that can be enjoyed by everyone. Then we can set up our DIF to say, well, developer, here's the list. But if as part of your project, you're going to create a park or contribute in a substantial way to building a park, you get a credit, and you could figure out how that would work. That could be set up in advance. What I don't know, we'd have to do some further research with our city attorney, is if the council can kind of, for a particular plan development on the spot or as part of the negotiation, have the negotiating point be, okay, you're going to build this park, and so we're going to lower your DIF in this other area for you. I don't know if we can do that. We would have to do that, look into that further.
A more common way to do it is you have a DIF set to... Sorry, I had both microphones on. You set the DIF for new park facilities, and then you require the first developer or the biggest developer in the area to build the full facility, subject to reimbursement from others that come in. So this would not be uncommon with Purple Pipe recycled water project. They're building in a part of the city that doesn't have the Purple Pipe, and BWP is reasonably close, but not all the way to the doorstep. You can, because of the project's demand, because of nexus and proportionality, require them to build it, which is actually efficient for the city, and then they're entitled to reimbursement from other developers that fill in the gap type projects. So for parks, it could be a little bit more flexible, because the way you calculate parks isn't linear like it is for a sewer. It's more like a fire station where you're looking at percentage of capture. So if you had a park fee, that could be something where a developer is required to build it subject to reimbursement, or just pay the fee, and there may be ways to incentivize that.
Well, good. Thank you very much. So any other questions, comments? Councilmember, Vice Mayor Anthony, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually like to build on a little bit of what the mayor was talking about. These credits, currently we only do that with plan developments, right?
So I'm not sure if we necessarily do it at all with regard to DIF. Like I said, there's a code that allows a developer to request it, credit if they're going to build something up front. I don't recall recently that anyone took us up on that. And I don't know of any other, in terms of the diff realm, have we done like a direct exchange or a direct credit?
The code that you're referencing, though, it only allows a developer if it's a planned development. Can any developer by right come in and?
No, any development that's assessed the diff, if they happen to be building a project on the list, on the Nexus Study, could build that project completely and then ask for a credit. In that case, though, it's very explicit to you're building the project that's on the list. It's very specific, not like a more general, like, oh, we're going to provide this other benefit, and so we're going to credit you. It's very specific. It's like, oh, I'm located at this intersection, and your diff Nexus Study says you had to have a double right turn lane. I'm going to build it for you completely, and then I'm going to get a credit off my diff for the cost of it.
Okay, and at the end of the day, the developer is already building in that area, so it's cheaper for them to do it than to pay the full diff, and cheaper for us to get it than charge the full diff.
It could be, although what I think would happen in practice is they're going to build, the diff is going to cover their share, but they're going to build the whole thing up front. And so in a way, they could be paying less overall, even though they're building, all of the project versus contributing a share. I think they'd have to do the math, I think, to see if it's in their advantage. And maybe it doesn't work because we've never really seen it. So maybe it's not really something they see valuable.
The city is still essentially limited by nexus and proportionality, though. In all cases, we cannot impose an exaction, in this case a development impact fee, that exceeds their fair share. So that's an absolute. We can create other tools, and we could require a full facility to be built. In the case of recycled water, they can't build half a pipeline. They have to build the whole pipeline. In the case of a park, it could be, well, you need to provide a new park. Because that's how we wrote the plan. To what Mr. Kriske said, it is important how we write the plan and how we list the improvements. And then we could create flexibility we don't currently have, and that is, the Public Works Director or the Community Development Director could enter into an agreement to provide for reimbursement from that category of fee, where they have overbuilt. And developers are not generally opposed to that because they know they will at least get reimbursement, and they know they can probably build it quicker than we can to serve their project.
Okay, yeah, the reason why I have been asking these questions all night. So I absolutely agree with my colleagues. We need to get the developers to pay their fair share. I personally believe that looking back at how little we've charged over the years, fair share today is probably a little bit higher than what our neighbors are. And to offset that, so I would like to see us be a little bit above what Pasadena and Glendale are at, but also put in these flexibility items. If a developer wants to come in and they're a housing developer and they want to add affordable housing outside of a state credit, we can find a way to offset the diffs and have it written down. Say, look, if you provide X number of units, that kind of thing. Or if you're a single family home, you want to do an ADU or you want to do an extension, and you provide off-street parking, right? Like little things that they probably aren't thinking of adding, but if they do, it gets them a discount on their diff. And multifamily housing, where it's, okay, you provide for sale units instead of just apartments, and we can get you a great discount on the diff, because at the end of the day, that's the kind of things we're trying to build. Simple stuff like if you're retail, add mixed use. If you're an industrial or office complex, you can go LEED certified, gold or platinum. If you use reclaimed water in your facility, little stuff like that we can list and say, hey, developer, you're going to come in, you want to build this thing. Yeah, our fees are a little high, but if you do X, Y, and Z, we can actually knock that down really low, because this is the kind of stuff we want in the city. And so just stuff like that, I'd like to see flexibility-wise. And so I would ask my colleagues to support me in seeing our staff reach out to our local developers who have built projects recently, Worth, Laterra, the folks who are actively involved, who are in that plan development stage, and just get a sort of a litmus test from them. What would work? What kind of fee schedule would get a developer to look at our city and go, oh, I see that it's high, but if I play by the rules and I play ball and I do the things that they want to do, I can get in, give them the things that they want, versus just all by right at the full diff level. And that way I think we can start to recoup some of the things that we've missed out on over the years because we haven't updated this in a long time.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Springer, one more thing.
Yeah, I just have a comment about affordable housing. And we don't have any slums in Burbank because in the developments that I've been involved with, development agreements, they're at the new property. Like, for example, First Street Village on Magnolia and First, and also 777 Front, and even Arrow Crossing. So that way we don't segregate people. We don't segregate our low income from our higher income. And we decided, years ago that that's a good thing. And it can be done cheaper while they're building. And so there you go. I mean, it's cheaper for them to do it. And plus we don't have segregation and we have no slums in Burbank.
Councilmember Frutos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to continue the comment where Councilmember Springer left off. I get what the Vice Mayor was talking about, but I saw it happening on First Street when the developer wanted a discount and he would have given us 12 low-cost housing units, but they were in a different part of Burbank. And I can tell you, being a police officer working in the south end of LA, that's what happened. And so only the people that can afford to live, in this case, downtown, it would have segregated people. So I like what the Vice Mayor was talking about. I'm open-minded, but it's already happened here where they try to do that to us. So those are my 2 cents for staff as you're considering these ideas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Anthony.
Yeah, definitely to that point, Councilmember Frutos, it would have to be at the location. Like, I don't want developer getting away with, well, this is what we envision for our place. I do not like that segregation. I don't like picking and choosing and putting your money elsewhere and say, well, if I get this here, then you can build wherever you want. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's what ends up happening when we just do the diffs, right? They pay that fee so that they can do whatever they want in their little corner of the woods, and then we're forced to take that money and build somewhere else. And so I think if we create a fee schedule where it's actually enticing to the developer to build what we want them to right on their location, we can set these fees pretty high and then start to chip away at it as we ask for things. I think we can be creative enough, and we can come back and talk about it when we're ready to.
Councilmember Springer.
Yeah, I think we've done that. Like with, for example, Mr. Behenen's project, First Street Village. We got the little park. We required a sound wall, the raised protected bike lanes. So staff negotiated with the developer to get what we wanted, the community benefits that we wanted and needed. And at 777 Front, we got the 69 more affordable units, again, protected bike lanes, MERV air filtration, the park that they maintained for like 55 years, right? Or a long time. So.
And 2 elevators.
And 2 elevators because we couldn't get the ramp that we wanted. So, I mean, that was, a major infrastructure project that will hopefully come later. But anyway, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Those projects is actually what gave me the inspiration. So we do that already with the plan developments. And so what I'm saying is if we codify that structure, then people who aren't plan developers who are by right can now come in and start to take advantage of that negotiating because we've set it in stone. That way we're not actually wasting staff time asking and going back and doing all this stuff because we know we're good at it. We know we can get it. So let's put it into a fee schedule. All the stuff we've done with Avion, with the Front Street project, with the First Street Village, we know what we're doing. We know what we want. We're good at it. Let's put that into an ordinance and a fee schedule to all development, so that the little guy who's doing a 4-unit project, he wants a discount. Okay, great. I'm going to do some off-street parking with this project. I'm going to make one of the units affordable housing. I'm going to make 2 of them for sale and live in the other. Open that up so that we start to get the things that we want, rather than just everything that comes in is by right and it's exactly what the developer wants.
So we are going to be limited to the kind of structure in a way. There's going to be a limit to the flexibility, because that's what the state statute requires. It requires us to identify our facilities, monetize them, divide them up proportionally, as Mr. Kriske has indicated, so that they can see ahead of time what their fee is. I think we can look for opportunities, but the diff fees are not subject to negotiation. So we'll have to think about whether there's incentives, but they would be distinct from the diffs. And the diffs are also specific to categories. So, for instance, the way that police and fire are written, there's a generation factor for every community facility, and the way that they're built in lanes, and we are still limited in how we use them for lanes. So if they double or triple on the parks, we can't give them a discount on the police and fire, because they still have a demand on police and fire. And if we don't charge them for police and fire, other users are now subsidizing, and that's also questionable legally. So there is going to be more structure than some of the creativity you're talking about, but we can look at incentives. But that's the whole idea of diffs, is they're giving structure to exactly how we collect and exactly how we use.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Prescott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Patrick Prescott, Community Development Director. I think we understand the conversation here. You'll be happy to know that some of what you're talking about, the updated specific plans that we'll be bringing forward will have a sort of tiered benefits process to facilitate some of what you're asking for. And also updated objective development standards will be able to get us some of those things we were only previously able to negotiate. And we'll be able to get that through even with the by right projects, plus the pay the development impact fees. So we have a lot to work on in 2022, but I think you'll be pleased with what the staff is bringing forward.
Thank you. Let me weigh in now. I agree with Councilmember Springer's original idea. I'm in favor of that, and also of the Vice Mayor's idea. Let's put it on the table for discussion, see if it works or not. If it doesn't, then we'll set it aside. But if it does, it's something, it could be an opportunity that we can discuss. Good food for thought. Any other comments? I'm looking for some direction from council then. Are you good? Staff's good? Okay,
Yes.
so let's take, there's no need for a vote then. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Staff is crystal clear on that direction. All right, the third report is the adoption of the Burbank Water and Power Renewable Portfolio Standard Procurement Plan and Enforcement Program Version 3. Ms. Samra, Assistant General Manager of the Power Supply, please present the report. Testing, testing. Can you hear me now?
Okay, thank you so much.
There you are.
I didn't realize I was on mute. My apologies.
Welcome.
So good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. My name is Mandeep Samra, Assistant General Manager, Power Supply at Burbank Water and Power. Today, I will be giving a presentation on the Renewable Portfolio Standard Procurement Plan and Enforcement Program, or RPS plan for short. Next slide. This slide provides a brief background as to why we are giving this update. The reason we are updating this plan is that our current plan has not been updated in nearly 10 years. Our current plan conforms to the first RPS regulations. In order to mitigate any penalties for noncompliance, this update is necessary. In addition, it shows a path forward to comply with Senate Bill 100, which I will discuss in the next slide. We waited to update this plan until the regulations were approved by the California Energy Commission, which occurred in July of 2021, so only a few months ago. Next slide. So what is the RPS? What is the Renewable Portfolio Standard? The Renewable Portfolio Standard is based on the percentage of renewable energy credits, or RECs for short, we retire on an annual basis. The denominator is retail sales. For example, if retail sales were 100 megawatt hours and our RECs retired were 50 RECs, then our RPS, or Renewable Portfolio Standard, would be 50% for that year. The RPS program has experienced major modifications since 2002, when it was first introduced as a concept. However, it wasn't until 2011 that a strict mandate was enforced on publicly owned utilities, or POUs, as you see in the WHO column. The RPS was modified 3 times. First, via Senate Bill X12, which set a requirement of 30% RPS by 2020. And then in 2015 by Senate Bill 350, which set a slew of additional requirements, including the mandate of an IRP, or an integrated resources plan, every 5 years. And the RPS was set at 50% by 2030. And then most recently in 2018, Senate Bill 100 was passed, and it set 2 items: a mandate of 60% RPS by 2030, and a goal of 100% carbon-free resource portfolio by 2045. I do want to note that BWP's goal for carbon-free resource portfolio is actually by 2040, so we're 5 years ahead of that goal. I also want to highlight that the IOU that you see here is referred to as for investor-owned utilities. So the investor-owned utilities had a lot of these mandates before the publicly owned utilities. But as a result of these changing times, we also need to update our plan in order to be in conformance with the law. Next slide. This is a brief slide that really walks you through the difference between the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission. I wanted to highlight this because we always hear about both of these entities, but the California Energy Commission is the agency that sets the mandates for the publicly owned utilities, and the California Public Utility Commission is who sets the mandate for the investor-owned utilities. But I also want to highlight that even though the CEC is the agency that governs us, it is our governing board, our city council, who sets how we will meet these mandates. Hence, this is why we are coming here today to request approval for our RPS procurement plan. Next slide. This slide is very busy, but I will highlight that if you look through the regulations, this probably covers 30 to 40 pages of regulations. So I wanted to put the regulations in one slide, walk through them, and highlight a lot of the major changes that have occurred. So we must not only procure renewable resources, but we are also limited in which types of renewable resources we can procure. A majority, 75% of our resources must be portfolio category 1 resources, which is a renewable resource where the renewable energy credit and the energy is delivered at the same time and directly delivered to a California Balancing Authority. Second is a portfolio content category 2, where the REC and the energy may be delivered at separate times. And a good example is a firmed and shaped wind product, and that can make up a maximum of 25% of our renewable resources. PCC3, portfolio content category 3, is the last type. This is a renewable energy product only. This can only be 10% max of our portfolio requirements. For context, just price points too, PCC3s are around $5, PCC2s are around $12, PCC3s, just the REC price, not the energy price, is around $17 to $25. So as you go up, the prices do escalate. I also want to highlight that as a result of Senate Bill 100, a lot of updates were made to the compliance periods. So the way it works for the requirements is that you have compliance periods made up of 3 to 4 years. So the compliance period we're in right now is compliance period 4. So by the end of compliance period 4, so by December 31st, we must be at 44% renewable portfolio standard. We could dip below in the previous years, but as long as we are above 33%, and meet the 44%, we will meet those targets. There are interim goals for each year that the CEC sets. So we're going to meet those interim goals. And that is really an incline up. So it's 37.5, and then it goes up to 41, and then it goes up to 44. That is how we are going to plan to meet these goals. And I also want to highlight that one of the other things that Senate Bill 100 did was, if you look at the very last line here, it sets this long-term contract requirement. This means that 65% of our RPS compliance must be contracts that are 10 years or longer in duration. I do want to highlight that the PCC2 and PCC3 products, they are not available via long-term contracts. So that only leaves our meeting this requirement via the PCC1 contracts. So historically, a lot of the contracts we did a lot of short-term contracts. We can't do that to the extent that we did in the past. The LTR, the long-term requirement, is important. As I will be discussing later, a lot of the contracts that we have that are expiring. Next slide. So this slide highlights where we are and where we're going. Historically, we have met the RPS requirements as set by the California Energy Commission. Unfortunately, we have not been as proactive in securing additional renewable contracts to meet future compliance requirements. We are in the process of negotiating 3 contracts right now. But before I go into that, I do want to highlight, when you look at this graph, please, look at 2 things. You see that red that's in the middle, starting in 2024, there's a major deficiency for the portfolio content category 1. Those are contracts we are negotiating, so I'm really hoping that we will be able to negotiate all the contracts that we need. But also those contracts we see on the very top, the gray and the black, the PCC2s and 3s, this assumes that we can find them on the market. I am letting you know that it's getting really hard to find those. It does assume that we maximize that, because maximizing those content categories reduces our costs significantly. So a lot of this assessment, a lot of this analysis assumes that we could find those renewables, those PCC2s and 3s yearly. I just don't know if we're going to do that. I think we'll be able to find some this year. I don't know what the future holds. But going back to some of the contracts that we are negotiating that meet the portfolio content category 1 contract and also meets the long-term requirement, we are currently negotiating 3 contracts right now. It's a solar plus a battery storage resource, a wind resource, and a resource that is a mixed portfolio. The wind and the solar plus battery resource are connecting to existing transmission lines. We're going to be utilizing the Southern Transmission System that we were able to successfully negotiate a long-term contract with. We will also need to negotiate an additional 6 to 8 contracts of various size, types, and various locations to meet that 60% RPS requirement by 2030. One of the things I failed to mention on the previous slide was SB 350, the law that was passed in 2015, also mandates that you meet your renewable requirements via diverse resources. And the diversity means different locations, different types of resources, different terms. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to just do renewable wind resources. You don't want to do just solar. You want to diversify it. That way you have optionality if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. So in terms of getting back to the contracts that we are negotiating, these contracts take a long time to negotiate. The solar plus the energy storage contract that we're working on, my staff has been working on it since before this time last year, so over 1 year. We are only halfway through the negotiation process. The wind project we have been negotiating for the last few months. The contract process, which includes a term sheet, which highlights essentially where the project is located, the initial price, et cetera. And then it's the PPA, which is a power purchase agreement. That can take anywhere from 12 months to 2 years. Hence, in order to secure the initial, additional resources we need by 2030, we need to start negotiating more contracts right now. I do want to highlight that we are working with the Southern California Public Power Authority and working separately with counterparties and marketers to identify additional renewable resources that are affordable, where we have transmission rights and can fit our needs. Our transmission limitations are a constraint, and my team will need to assess or access additional transmission in order to meet that 60% renewable portfolio mandate. That is something we're also concurrently doing. Unfortunately, one of the contracts that we are negotiating, that solar plus storage, may not make it to the final stage, as the developer is experiencing major supply chain issues, and the developer has also nearly doubled the price of the contract. This is important because historically, utilities have less than a 50% success rate to bring a contract to the final stages. This is often due to legal concerns, lack of agreement on insurance, transmission issues, price. Now we have supply chain issues, to name a few. So when I mentioned that we need to secure an additional 6 to 8 resources, that means we need to start negotiating at least another 12 to 16 contracts from now to 2030. That is only 8 years, because less than half will make it to the finish line. And to fill the renewable needs for the future, based on prices we are seeing today, the average cost will be about $7 million annually, which was not budgeted. A majority of our future contracts will need to be 10 years longer or in duration to meet that long-term requirement. And this is a major shift in the regulations and the way utilities do business. In the past, many deficiencies in the renewable portfolio standard could have been made up during the year by buying short-term renewable resources. But now we have that long-term requirement, and we have to start thinking in the long term. If we do not secure these additional renewables, we may face penalties in excess of $147 million. Penalties can be implemented for a shortage in the RPS goal overall, so basically not getting to that 44% for compliance period 4, not getting to that 60% by 2030, a shortage in the long-term requirement, which is 65% of our RPS has to be long-term, and also a shortage in the portfolio content category requirements, specifically for category 1. Starting in 2024, we have a shortage in the RPS. Starting in 2026, we are short all 3. That is why we are just trying to negotiate as many contracts as possible. In order to secure these additional resources, which means spending time researching these resources, finding counterparties, and negotiating the contracts, as well as meeting the other various compliance mandates that power supply has, we will need additional staff members. I do want to prepare you that during the budget process, power supply will be asking for 2 additional staff members to assist with the renewable resource procurement process and to assist with the many compliance mandates the power supply is facing. Next slide. I'm almost done. Don't worry, only 3 more slides. So I do want to highlight, because I did reference this, that I want to focus on the long-term contracts we have right now. When you look at this slide, you do see, okay, we have 9. But in 2022, July to be exact, next year, we lose a 5 megawatt resource. That is that Pleasant Valley, Wyoming wind. That is a firm and shaped resource, meaning that we get 5 megawatts around the clock. And then in 2026, we lose a 1.7 megawatt resource, the Amoresco landfill gas resource. And then in 2029, we lose 2 more. So in addition, the RPS in addition to losing these contracts, the RPS requirement is inching upwards, widening that gap. So you see that red line that I showed earlier, that red bar chart where it shows what our gap is. It widens because of the contracts we're losing, the RPS going up, and we are also looking at load growth, which is a good thing. We're seeing a lot of new developments, and we're also seeing an increase in building electrification and transportation electrification. As our load increases, so does our RPS obligation. Over the last 6 years, BWP has only secured one additional renewable contract. As I mentioned, we are in the process of securing 3. Well, 1 will most likely not move forward due to the price doubling. So in the future, in the coming months and the years, get used to my face. I will be coming back asking for approvals for renewable contracts. We are looking to secure resources where we have transmission, where the price is competitive and the resources are diverse. Next slide. This walks through where we have the deficiencies. So starting immediately, we do have a shortage of portfolio content 2 and 3. Like I say, we usually buy those inter-year. I think we will be good for this year. We have secured some of these contracts already. But when you look right now at PCC 1, portfolio content category 1, we are short starting in 2024. That is why we're trying to secure those 2 contracts we are negotiating. And in terms of the long-term requirement, I did walk through all the contracts we are losing. We are short 5% in that long-term requirement starting in 2026, and that gap only widens. And then we're also short in diversification. So we are going to diversify our resources moving forward. Next slide. This just highlights the major changes made to this plan. The last plan, as I mentioned earlier, came to City Council back in 2012. That was almost 10 years ago. This plan updates our compliance to be consistent with SB 100. It was an update to the RPS targets. It addresses the long-term requirement. It includes additional opt-out measures. And it includes an update to allow us to decrease our retail sales by a green option program. It will also provide an update on where we are with the RPS needs. Lastly, it conforms with the law. Because it's been so many years since the last plan was developed, it was not in conformance with the law. I wanted to come here and I wanted to get us, to ship shape to meet RPS, and this is the first step of many coming forward. Next slide. So the recommendation you have before you today is the BWP board and staff recommend that the City Council adopt and ratify the proposed BWP Renewable Portfolio Standard Procurement Plan and Enforcement Program version 3. Thank you, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much for that report. Council members, any questions, comments? Or move the agenda item? Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just one brief question, so I hopefully won't keep Councilmember Springer waiting too long. So first of all, thank you for the report. I am convinced that this report complies with all of the requirements of state law, but I did have just one question. I know we have a recommendation from one of our commissions. We're not going to talk about that tonight. It's not on the agenda. That'll be for another day. So I'm just going to ask you a big picture question. From the utilities perspective, what do you see as both the opportunities and the obstacles to not just meet a 60% threshold by 2030? What about 100%? And again, I'd love to hear an answer that talks about the opportunities of 100% renewable and the obstacles to getting there.
So in terms of opportunities, I will say we will need access to transmission. So in order to make this possible, we are going to have to do a transmission study to consider joining different balancing authorities, such as the ISO, where we would have access to more renewables. So that is the only opportunity that will get us to RPS, to get to 100%, even to get to 60%, I have to secure transmission. So there is opportunity there. So we are looking at every single option to get to access additional transmission. But in terms of the obstacles, I mean, I already mentioned transmission. We are landlocked, and we are also in the Los Angeles Balancing Authority. Even though, we came back here a few months ago for the Southern Transmission System contract, that gives us access to about 70 megawatts of renewables in that area. We're going to need a lot more than that to get to 60%. So in order to get to 100%, we're going to need to join a different balancing authority. I think that's the only way to get there. Secondly, resources have to be available. we are running into a lot of issues of developers having supply chain issues. So solar, for example, a lot of it is supplied, a lot of the parts are supplied from China. We have major supply chain issues where developers are delaying their project 1 to 2 years. And that is now, it's a domino effect. So projects coming online in 2023 won't come online until 2025, and then et cetera. So you're having major delays there. The other obstacle is cost. In the 2018 IRP, I think it was brought up and there was a minor study done that did not consider transmission constraints. And I think on cost-wise, this is in 2018, costs have only gone up. I think it was at least a 30% rate increase to get us to about 100%, but that did not consider the transmission constraints. That was really contractually. So ultimately, it's going to be doing that transmission study. That is a part of the budget request we'll be bringing to council next year to do a very extensive transmission study. We're also going to come to increase the cost of the integrated resources plan because we need to do these studies. We need to consider these options. But yeah, without transmission and with the lack of resources, ideally the resources we really need to procure geothermal, and being part of the Los Angeles Balancing Authority, we're seeing maybe 5 megawatts available, right? If you could go in the ISO, maybe there's 200 megawatts available. So we're landlocked and we're restricted there in the types of renewables we could get our hand on. Don, if you wanted to add in, please let me know. I just want to make sure Councilmember Schultz, they answered your question.
Oh, go for it, Don.
Sure. The only thing I might add is we are also looking at local sourcing. Now, we need a lot of space to be able to locally source. And if there's one thing we don't have, it's a lot of space here in Burbank. But we are looking at rooftops and being as creative as possible. So we are partnering with the airport on looking at solar on top of, and planning, we're currently in planning, to put solar on top of the regional intermodal transportation center. We have met with Burbank Unified School District to see if we might be able to build them some covered parking. And then we could use the rooftop of the covered parking for solar, as well as leasing some of their land to put storage, because we really need that solar plus storage component. That's also part of the RITSI development. We're partnering with local businesses like Avion on their new build and looking at putting solar on top of buildings 5 and 6 and working through that with them, and seeing where else we might be able to do that. As we meet with developers on new projects, this is always part of our conversation. We will also be completing, in partnership with other city departments, an assessment of all city-owned facilities and seeing what opportunities we might have there to build solar. So that's all cool and expensive. These are expensive megawatts. It's very expensive to build local solar. We have no inexpensive options. It's also very expensive to build transmission, and we're gonna need both. So it is going to be a real struggle, and you will see that as we bring forward our next budget to meet the regulations we've got. As Mandeep has mentioned, we've got a $7 million a year price tag that was unbudgeted previously from now through the end of the decade. And that's if prices remain where they are, which is unlikely, as you see the build in the state requirements, and every utility here has to meet that. Every utility is going to be going for those exact same resources. And what happens with limited supply and increased demand? Prices go up. So I think we can expect to see that. So Mandeep did her usual amazing job of explaining a complex issue. I just wanted to add those points.
Well, thank you, Don, and thank you, Mandeep. And I'll just say, yes, you absolutely answered the question. Again, I think that the plan makes sense. It complies with the law. I want the viewers to know that I've had many conversations with both of you, but Don, even as recently as today, I know you share my vision. I know you want to get us to 100% as soon as possible. And I'm just thankful that we're having the conversation because, you know, 2030 may be ambitious, but here's the reality. Senate Bill 100 says we have to get there by 2045, and that's going to be coming a lot quicker than we're ready for. So I'm glad that we're at least thinking outside the box, looking at all these tools, looking forward to the conversation. Councilmember Springer, thank you so much for letting me ask that question. I'm done for now.
Councilmember
Thank
Springer?
you. Thank you very much for your presentation. So how does IPP fit in?
That is a great question. I will say the Southern Transmission System that we now have access to for the next 50 years as a result of being in the IPP renewal, that's how it figures in. It really allows us to have access to renewables via the transmission lines. IPP will be converting to hydrogen post 2030. That is not considered a renewable resource right now, but it is considered a zero carbon resource. So it will help us meet that zero carbon goal in 2045, but it helps us bring in renewables using the transmission line.
Okay, thank you. And does the Green Choice Program help at all, or is it just a little tiny drop in the bucket, or?
I mean, right now we have very little customers that sign up. So what it does is it reduces our obligation. So it reduces our retail sale obligation. It is less than 0.25%. It is very, very small right now.
But is it coming back? If we get 2,000 people, if we have a campaign to get all 2,000 people to sign up, will that help?
Any reduction to our retail sales definitely helps. But one thing with the Green Option Program is too, you have to retire renewable energy credits. So it cost does go up. We do have to procure credits, and we do have to retire those credits on behalf of the program. So one of the things that we did include here as an update was we could subtract it from retail sales because we did not include that in our previous compliance requirements. But now going forward, we have that benefit per this update to the plan.
Thank you. So it's coming back, right? I think it helps if people are just thinking about it, if it's an option. And
I think they are revamping it. Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong. I know they are revamping the program, and we may be enhancing it a little bit as well, but that'll take a few months.
Okay, and I think I passed on this suggestion to you. Somebody at the farmer's market suggested you just sign people up right there, because if you tell them how to do it and they go home, you've lost them. So just get them. And they'll be really grateful that you did. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Frutos.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. My only question is, I'm looking at page 7 of BWP's
Councilmember
current
Frutos.
long-term
Councilmember Frutos.
RPSs.
Councilmember Frutos.
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, no, you said
Hello?
you said thank you, Vice Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I demoted you. I mean to promote you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
Thank you.
I was thinking of Constantine. Sorry. Okay, so now that I've been corrected, BWP's current long-term RPS contracts. I'm looking at the small hydro ones, Valley Pumping and Titan. How come there's no end dates to those contracts? I'm curious.
We own and operate them. So
that's a good
update. So,
all right.
And they are considered long-term contracts, even though we own and operate them. So I wanted to, but there is no end date until there's no water to flow, I guess. But
well, yeah, that's my next question. In the drought that we're in, and I keep reading that the hydro type of energy might be limited until we get out of this drought. What are we going to do with these two? Well, now I know that we own them. We're working them.
yeah, and then also they provide very little to our overall RPS needs. So I think less than 1%. So in terms of how we use them, they're a very small portion of them. It's those big 40 megawatt and 10 megawatt deals that are coming up to us, and those aren't expiring until the 2030 timeframe. So for the hydro, it's a small portion of our portfolio.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Vice Mayor Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. I know we here are all focused on the future and the goals and all of that stuff. Most people at home, they're just looking at their utility bills. How is this going to affect rates moving forward?
So I don't have the exact percentage, but I can tell you rates will need to be increased to meet these compliance requirements. So SB 100 wasn't passed until 2018, and the regulations weren't approved until a few months ago. So that's why you're seeing this gap of us coming back and giving you this update. Our budget's going to walk through that. Don, you could probably answer this better, but we are going to be asking for, there's going to need to be a rate increase to allow us to make these meet these compliance requirements. So that is coming. The exact number I don't have offhand right now, but it's going to be on the renewable side at least $7 million a year for the next 7-8 years. So,
after that, I mean, I know these are big capital improvements, big changes that we're making. Moving forward past that, long term, are rates going to flatten out? Are they going to dip? Are these kinds of renewable resources, are they actually cheaper in the long run for our ratepayers?
Unfortunately, no. They're not cheaper in the long term for the ratepayers, at least not the 20-year long term. Each percentage up is going to be more difficult and more expensive to achieve. In addition, we are facing significant pressures in the price of natural gas in the near term. Our price of natural gas has doubled. So we will be coming to you and explaining the pressures that we are seeing, and we expect to request a significant rate increase for the next several years. And then moving from 60 to 100% is going to be very challenging. We will be spending additional funding on rooftop solar, and we must find a way to build and buy transmission. We must. And transmission is exorbitantly expensive. So we will be looking at partnering with other utilities to do that. We are opening those conversations now. We are actually involved in a long-term study called Power from the Prairie that is looking at potentially bringing wind in from the east and sending solar to the east so that, the beautiful solar available in the Southwest can help those middle states, and the beautiful wind produced in the prairie states may be able to help us. So we are looking at options well beyond what has been in the normal mix, because there is nothing normal about moving to that 100% renewable. So I wish I could tell you that, sure, it's going to be easy. It will not be easy. It is going to be expensive, and we are going to have to continually be incredibly creative about how we go about this and look for efficiencies and effectiveness as we have this past year across the utility. So with an eye toward that, we have already found $18.8 million in cost avoidance or cost savings this past year as we track that. So we'll be doing our best to offset what we can, but this is going to be a significant challenge.
So the state and the federal government are both asking us to do this. Are they not giving us any subsidies, any grants? Where's the disconnect? They're telling us to do this, and our prices are going to go up. Do we see movement on this? Is there anything at the state or the federal level that might come through to help us offset these costs?
There is, and we have a grant writer at the ready. So as soon as we are able to do the applications, we will be applying. In fact, Mandeep and her team won a $125,000 grant to help with the storage project that we're doing on site. We will be going hard after any funding that's available.
Would it help? Are there other cities that are doing this? Would it help for us to write a letter to our state reps, to our congressmen? Should we be out there saying, look, we want to do the good and right thing, but the prices are ridiculous? I mean, is that important for us to start working on?
Yes, I think we will be doing that going forward as well. We will be asking for your help.
Okay.
And there is an aspect of a cost limitation threshold that can be developed as well, where you could put a pause on RPS, but I mean, it has to be due diligence. You have to go in front of the city council, California Energy Commission. To date, no one has pulled that trigger. So there's a lot of options, but all options lead towards compliance, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Let me ask a question in regards to the cost benefit. We've got a lot of homes in the city. How many homes would it take to install solar panels to create a benefit for the utility? Is that just not doable?
I think that's a more complicated question than we might think. When we install solar, so at the projects that we are looking at, we will own the solar, we will run the solar, and we will apply the solar to our grid. It will count toward our RPS requirements. For solar that an individual installs on their home, the only help we get from that is the reduction in the denominator. And right now, until we hit 5% solar on homes, we are having to pay the homeowner at the same cost that they buy electricity from us. But here's the thing, we have to pay for all of those substations and all of the wires and all of the employees who manage that grid and the generation. The homeowner is only paying for generation, yet is getting paid the same cost that covers all of that. So we really need a net electric metering price that appropriately pays the homeowner for the generation, not for the cost that a utility incurs by making that generation available to others. So it's a complicated question. We are looking at all options, including working with companies that may look to install solar, but then be able to pull solar or pull energy from those homes to supply the grid. We're looking at that option. I know Glendale is looking at that option too, but again, very expensive with a need for a lot of rooftops, many times more than what we see today. So, complicated answer, sorry.
Sure, no problem. I understand that, kinda. But we have to be proactive. You gotta start somewhere. We keep saying it's gonna be more expensive, it's gonna be expensive. So the longer we wait, the more expensive it's gonna be. So if we don't start being proactive with the community and possibly, like you were saying, reaching out to them and saying, we've got this program through Burbank Water and Power. You could help the system, you could help yourself. I think it would be beneficial for staff to look at it, at least put it on the table, see the pros and cons. If you don't feel you're the professionals. If you don't feel it's doable or worthwhile, then don't bring it to council, or bring it to council and let us turn it down. But give us an option 1, 2, and 3, right? Just to consider something other than just saying it's going to be so expensive. It's going to be more expensive a year from now. So.
Yes, and Honorable Mayor, we agree. We are focused on the least expensive options right now, which is the business partnerships, potentially the partnership with BUSD, potentially being able to put solar on our own buildings. And that is our full-time, a full-time focus for us in this near term. So we want to search out those least expensive options. And then meanwhile, the rules may be changing. We've got an article in front of us where the rules may be changing around net electric metering on individual home-owned solar. And we'd like to give that time to sort itself out so we know what we're doing in that space. And meanwhile, we are actively, very proactively, very aggressively looking at our options.
Yeah, let me just give you a couple examples. Went to spring training in Arizona State University. All their parking lots have pretty much all the solar panels throughout their parking lots. Palm Springs, a couple of colleges down there, all their parking lots have solar attached to them. I'm sure, like you were saying, it's expensive, but let's start now. It's a big elephant. Let's start a bite at a time, right?
Agreed.
Anyway, okay, thank you very much. Looking for some direction from council. Councilmember Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will make a motion, but I just had one final question based on the questions from my colleagues. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So it sounds like, cost is going to be an enormous factor, but that's not the only factor. The other factor we have to look at is where we get the renewables from. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to an extent we can generate it, doing some of the things that the mayor just talked about. But are you saying that even with that in mind, we're still going to run into the obstacle of that's not going to produce enough, so we're going to have to outsource it? And that's where that transmission study comes in?
Yes, a majority of our needs, even if we could put it on every rooftop, it's not going to meet our needs. So it's going to be in viable rooftops, right? So that's why we have to look at the power purchase agreements.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to secure. A majority of our renewable compliance will be through long-term contracts. So that's the other thing, right? The long-term requirement where you have to have a long-term contract and you have to have a contract. That is what we're looking at as well. So a good portion will be using the transmission lines.
And when does that study, when do you anticipate that that'll be done?
So the transmission study will be part of the budget next year. It's going to take probably a year or two, but we are concurrently also doing the integrated resources plan. So that is also going to be kicked off. That will have a robust stakeholder process. So we'll be running scenarios on items like you mentioned, like the 100% RPS, the 60% RPS, somewhere in the middle. But we really do want to get community engagement. We want to listen to their concerns. We want to provide responses, and we want to provide educated responses to see what the rate impact would be, what our limitations are, constraints are with the mandates. Like I said, we have that long-term requirement. We don't have transmission. Prices are going through the roof. We're limited with our renewable supply. That's why we're looking at everything we can get and trying to secure it now before prices go up even more.
Thank you both for the answers. To move the agenda item forward, Mr. Mayor, I will move that we adopt and ratify the proposed Burbank Water and Power Renewable Portfolio Standard Procurement Plan and Enforcement Program version 3.
Is there a second? Councilmember Springer seconds it. All right. Any other comments? Roll call.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes.
Councilmember Frutos?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Anthony?
Yes.
Mayor Talamantes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that report, by the way. Excellent. Next item on the agenda is the appointment of city council members to committee and liaison roles for the 2022 calendar year. Viviana Garzon, Administrative Analyst in the City Manager's Office, please present the report. And welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Talamantes, Vice Mayor Anthony, and members of the City Council. Viviana Garzon, Administrative Analyst with the City Manager's Office. I am here tonight to present a report to appoint members of the City Council to the 29 committees and coalitions listed on Attachment 1 of the staff report for the calendar year 2022. I'm on an annual basis after the reorganization meeting in December. City Council updates these assignments. To ensure consistency in council appointments throughout the year, members of City Council are appointed to participate in a variety of organizations, serving as members or liaisons to represent the city's interest and report on the activities of various entities to City Council and the public. The only addition to this year's list is the Upper Los Angeles River and Tributaries Working Group, which is within the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and under direction of the California Natural Resources Agency. The working group is charged with developing a revitalization plan for the Upper Los Angeles River, the tributaries of the Pacoima Wash, Tahanga Wash, and Verdugo Wash, and any additional tributary waterway that the working group determines to be necessary. In 2018, then Mayor Emily Gabaletti was appointed by the California Natural Resources Agency to represent the city in this group. That same year, Bill SB 1126 allowed appointed group members to designate an alternate member to the group. Then Mayor Emily Gabaletti selected Councilmember Sharon Springer, who was at that time the Vice Mayor, as her alternate in this group. Councilmember Springer has been an active member of this group since then. In keeping with the request of the California Natural Resources Agency, staff recommends that council appoint Mayor Talamantes to the Upper Los Angeles River and Tributaries Working Group. That concludes my report. I can answer any questions you may have, or council may proceed with making appointments to the entities listed in Attachment 1. Mayor Talamantes, if you wish, I can name each committee on the list at the start of each appointment.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. Any questions right now before we begin? Ms. Garzon, go ahead.
Okay.
One quick question. Do we need to appoint an alternate for that Upper Los Angeles River and Tributaries Working Group or not?
Only if Mayor Talamantes wishes.
Sure. I mean, let's keep it mayor, vice mayor.
Okay, let's start with number one.
If that's an agreement.
I was going to offer, if Councilmember Springer wanted to continue, I was going to offer her first because she'd been on before.
Well, they didn't meet for a while, but I just had a meeting here recently. I'll help in any way I can. Just let me know if you need an alternate. I'm happy to be the alternate.
Yeah, I'll if we want to move forward, I'll move that to Sharon.
Sure.
Councilmember Springer is the
Councilmember
alternate.
Springer is the alternate for that. Thank you.
Okay, so we took care of number 29.
That was
Beautiful.
We're working backwards.
Okay. All right. Number 1, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee.
I would like to stay on that.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
And let's start, let me just, I forgot to give a little bit of a structure to this segment. We go through this. Some of the appointments are mayor, vice mayor, several. Others are obviously the people that have served on it, have served this past year on a certain committees or appointments. They, in my opinion, would have the first ask, are you still interested? Are you still interested? And if both of the same members are still interested, or the one member, we move on to the next one. Is that okay with my colleagues? I think Mayor Frutos used that last year and it worked great. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Airport Ad Hoc Committee.
And that's the mayor, vice.
So that has been, okay, so Mayor Talamantes, Vice Mayor Anthony. Okay, Audit Committee.
I like to stay on the audit committee.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. We just had a meeting, so we won't have another meeting for 6 months.
Okay. We're going on to the 4th one, Economic Development Subcommittee.
I'd like to stay on that.
Likewise, unless somebody has a burning desire. I'll stay as well.
Okay. Fiscal and Treasurer's Review Group.
I like to stay on it.
I would as well.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. Number 6, Public Information Office Advisory Committee.
Mayor, vice mayor.
Okay. Do we want to keep it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Racial Equity and Diversity Subcommittee. Mayor
that's-
Talamantes.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the other member is Councilmember Springer.
Yeah, I'd like to stay there, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Springer. The I-5 Subcommittee.
I don't know if we still need, there's still some work to be finished. We may. Sure. Yeah, let's, Councilmember Springer, are you still interested in staying on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Likewise.
Okay. Arroyo Verdugo Community Subregion Joint Powers Authority.
Yes.
And I'd still like to be the alternate if that's okay.
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 Excellent. Okay, Disaster Council. So per BMC, Mayor Talamantes, you would be part of this group, and we need an alternate, which would be, it can be the mayor, the vice mayor.
The vice mayor.
Mhm.
We'll go with the vice mayor. I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Domestic Violence Task Force.
I'd like to stay on that.
Same. Thank you.
All right, moving on.
You are all making this so easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 12, Cal City's annual statewide voting delegate. So tradition is the mayor and vice mayor serve in this committee.
Yes.
Okay, same for the next one, the Cal City's Los Angeles division. Okay, so those will remain mayor and vice mayor. Number 14, San Fernando Valley Council of Governments.
I'd like to stay. I've been there for a while.
I'd like to remain the alternate, if that's okay.
There you go.
San Fernando Valley Service Sector Governance Council.
I'm in my second year. It's a 3-year appointment.
Okay.
So,
All right, so you remain. I'll make a note of that 3-year appointment, Mayor Talamantes. Number 16, Southern California Association of Governments, District 42 representative.
right now the district is represented by Glendale.
Okay, so leave it as this. Number 17, Southern
Real quick,
California.
I have a question about that one. What happens in May of next year? Do we have to come back and appoint somebody, or does that rotate?
Yeah, it's a rotating, it's a gentleman's agreement that they have it for 2 years, and it comes to Burbank for 2 years. Because for a long time there, Glendale kept it for a long time. So I was the one that brought up the question, why can't we do this so we both serve, both cities serve and alternate? Well, I guess
So that'll come back to us in May then?
Yeah, I guess that's a good idea. Yes.
Should we assign someone now?
So who?
So in May 2022, it comes back to Burbank. Should we assign someone now?
Well, it goes between, go ahead.
Certainly, we could assign somebody now, or we could just bring it back as a standalone at the time and ask for the council to select somebody. It's really your preference. It's easy enough either way.
I think we better just to bring it back at the time.
Okay, number 17, Southern California Association of Governments Annual General Assembly Voting Delegate.
Mayor, Vice Mayor?
Number 18, Valley Economic Alliance Board of Directors.
I'd like to stay.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm okay.
all right, move forward.
Board of Library Trustees.
I'd like to stay.
Burbank Cultural Arts Commission.
I'd like to stay on that.
Number 21, Infrastructure Oversight Board. That's Mayor and Vice Mayor. Okay. Parks and Recreation Board.
I'd like to stay on that.
Okay. Thank you. The Police Commission.
I'd like to stay on it.
I would as well.
Okay. Senior Citizen Board.
I'd like to stay.
Likewise, I can relate very well to them.
Sustainable Burbank Commission.
I'd like to stay.
Me too.
Okay. Transportation Commission.
I'd like to stay.
Same.
Okay, 2 more. Burbank Association of Realtors.
I'd like to stay.
Likewise.
Okay, and Burbank Chamber of Commerce. That's usually the mayor, so Mayor Talamantes. Okay, and at the beginning of the report, Mayor Talamantes, you'll be the representative for the Upper Los Angeles River and Tributaries Working Group with Councilmember Sharon Springer as the alternate.
Good.
Excellent,
Good.
thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, colleagues, have been very well. Okay, let's move on to, now is the time for the introduction of additional agenda items. Do members of the council have any items to introduce? Yes, I knew I skipped something. This is a time for brief council comments, including reporting on council committee assignments. Colleagues?
Mr. Mayor, I can go first.
Yes, go
briefly, if
ahead,
you'd like.
Councilmember Schultz.
So in between seeing many of you at a variety of holiday functions around town, I just wanted to note a couple quick things. On Thursday, December 9th, I went to Coffee with a Cop, and I was really pleased to see 2 of our police commission members there. It seems like there was some good interactions with the community, so job well done, Chief Albanese. On Saturday, December 11th, I was joined by Councilmember Springer and Councilmember Anthony. I believe that was everybody at the Zonta Says No to Gender-Based Violence March. And I just wanted to compliment Councilmember Springer again on excellent remarks at that event. Yesterday, we all went on the Warner Brothers Media Center tour after council reorganization. Very impressive building. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that just before closed session today, I joined Councilmember Frutos and our city clerk, Ms. Mullins, on a quick look at the conversion of our old paper records to those electronically stored records. Ms. Mullins, really impressive work. You're making good progress on it, and it's something I'm really happy to support. Thanks for your initiative.
Anyone else like to? Vice Mayor Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Friday, I attended the Leadership Burbank Mix and Mingle Holiday Party, where we got to meet the current Leadership Burbank class. They're about to choose their project, their next meeting. They're going to be deciding on what their project is for this year. So, just a shout out to Leadership Burbank. They're doing good work in the city. I attended the Zonta's Say No to Gender-Based Violence March, and then later that day, the Burbank Historical Society's Holiday Appreciation Day. The Historical Society, they're back up and running. They're doing tours. They've got some great new stuff. Well, new to them. It's old. It's old stuff. It's Historical Society stuff. Really great things happening over there. So if you do get a chance, please check it out. Sunday morning, I went to the Kiwanis Santa's Pancake Breakfast, put on by the local Burbank Kiwanis. And they had Santa there, and they were doing book giveaways. Buy a breakfast and get a wrapped book present. So it was really nice. The local Key Club high school students were there helping out and volunteering their time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Frutos. No, you're muted, or at least we can't hear you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry. Mr. Mayor, back on Wednesday, December the 8th, I was in Magnolia Park, and I had a talk with Boy Scouts all about what the duties are as the mayor of the city of Burbank. Down on Thursday the 9th, I attended the Infrastructure Oversight Board. Friday, December the 10th, I attended the Leadership Burbank Mix and Mingle Holiday Party. And then on Saturday 11th, I attended the Burbank Historical Society Holiday Appreciation Day event that they had. And I also attended the Warner Brothers Media Center tour. And it kind of piggybacked where Councilmember Schultz left off regarding kind of the brief tour that we had, that the city clerk is basically putting in digital ordinances, policies that the council is doing. I wanted to also publicly commend our city clerk for her forethought and making it easier and transparent. So with her hard work, today I was watching an individual scan policies from 1946. And the idea, the vision of our city clerk was that anybody can go back in time from the comfort of their home on the internet, go to the city clerk's website and be able to download any policy, any minutes that they would like of what the policies were on this particular time to make it easier for our community members. And for that, she deserves a big hug and a big shout out. Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And that's all I have to report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Springer?
Yes, thank you. I was at the Leadership Burbank Mix and Mingle Party. I had a meeting with Sustainable Burbank Commission members Chris Weber and Vicki Kirschenbaum, and with Transportation Commissioner Jason Lewis. And as I was with my colleagues at the Zonta Says No to Violence March, and at the Burbank Historical Society Holiday Party. And last night I Zoomed the PFLAG meeting, and that's it.
Thank you. Well, I'll weigh in. I attended the Burbank Cultural Arts Commission meeting. I also was at the Coffee with a Cop. Very informative. A lot of the public was stopping by and donating the toys that were being asked for by the by the police officers. So thank you to Chief Albanese for that. I also attended the Leadership Burbank Mix and Mingle holiday party. It was very nice, very cold evening. Burbank Historical Society Holiday Appreciation Day. If anybody out there is listening to this, please make an attempt to go to the Historical Society and take a tour of the house. I mean, they have a museum, which is great. They've got a lot of old pieces of equipment. But if you get a chance to get a tour of the house, take a tour of the house. It's amazing. It's a real throwback. I participated in a city council reorganization. I want to thank my colleagues for appointing me their mayor and the city of Burbank's mayor. Thank you very much, colleagues. And I also went to the Warner Brothers Media Center tour. Amazing what they've done over there with that new tour. So there's nothing else. Let's see, now we can go to the time for introduction of additional agenda items. Do members of the council have any items to introduce? All right, seeing none. Oh, he did? Oh. Vice Mayor Constantine, I thought you said no. And then, go ahead, Vice Mayor Constantine. Anthony?
I'm trying to find the new space in this new office where my hand looks like, because here you can't see it. I'd like to agendize a discussion item for council to review Burbank Municipal Code Section 5-3-801, license to sell firearms at retail. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Frutos?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if with your permission, I do have a comment I'd like to add. I forgot to add it earlier, if it's okay with you.
Is this in part of your reporting out?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday season, to report out, and a happy new year. And this is our last council meeting. And Burbank, we're welcoming a new year. Be safe for the holiday season. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Mayor Frutos. So, having no other business, I just want to wish everybody happy holiday season. Stay safe out there. Be vigilant. If you see something, say something. But just try and stay safe. There's too many things that are going on that are unpredictable. And so just watch your surroundings and be safe. Take care of the family. And we'll see you next year. So now we adjourn the meeting to Tuesday, January 4th at 6 p.m. for a regular meeting through an online meeting process. The public may view the meeting online or on television and will be able to provide public comment in the following 3 ways: by leaving an e-comment on the city webpage, by emailing the city council directly, or by calling in directly to the council meeting at 818-238-3335. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you and good night.